Hello, I'm James, and today we're going to be building out this blog template built using NextJS 14 Velite, so it can utilize Markdown, shadcn, and Tailwind. So this is a static blog, so if we scroll down here, we can see a couple of things. Firstly, we're going to have a nice glass navbar, so content looks like it's going behind this navbar here, and it sort of blurs it out there. We're also going to have this little latest post down here, which is going to show us our latest posts. If we go in and see what we can do with rehype pretty code, our blog posts are going to be written in MDX, so it allows us to utilize some custom components, as well as have some really cool highlighting like this. So you can get your code blocks to have syntax highlighting, you can draw attention to a specific line, you can show the line numbers, and you can even draw attention to specific words as well. And it has lots of support for highlighting, and it has titles as well for your code blocks, captions, and various other things. And you can even change the theme to pretty much any VS Code theme that you want. The other thing we'll notice is we have a dark mode and a light mode. So the site is going to support dark mode and light mode, and then also system. So that's just going to follow what the user wants, so whatever they've got that operating system set to. Then we're also going to have a brief about page with a little picture of you, and then some description as well. We go to blog, we're also going to have pagination between our blogs. So we have a couple of blog posts here, so we have some paging between it. And moreover, we're going to have some responsive design as well. So this blog post is going to work even if you're on mobile. We're going to get a nice mobile menu, and everything's going to look nice and good. And in this page here, what we have is an example of a custom Markdown component. So you can write a component that draws attention to itself like this, like a callout. So if you want to draw specific attention to something, and that's using MDX Markdown components. Now for this tutorial, we're going to be following along, and the code is in this Git repository. If you go into the commits, each YouTube chapter is actually going to follow a GitHub commit. So they're going to be labeled, and you should be able to find exactly what we changed in a specific section. Just to show you that MDX content there, if we go into callout, what MDX allows you to do, as I said, is you can essentially use JSX within your Markdown. So we have a callout component that we've made, and then we have this callout here. So it's a really cool way to set up your blog post. So let's jump into the tutorial. So to get started, we need to create a NextJS application, and to do that, we're going to be using the create next app command line interface. So here you have the commands for your package manager. If you're using npm, you're going to be doing this npx one. I'm going to be using pnpm, so I'm doing pnpm create next-app and hit enter. Once it's installed some stuff, it's going to ask you some questions. So I'm just going to call this my first and then blog. Then it's going to ask, would you like to use TypeScript? Yes, we're going to be using TypeScript in this project. We're going to use that default ESLint, and that will install it for us. We're going to be using Tailwind, and again, really nice that it's going to install it for us. Would you like to use the source directory? We're going to hit no. Would you like to use the app router? Now, we are going to be using this, which means we can use React server components, and it's really cool. I have a whole video on what React server components are if you don't already know, but essentially, it should make our site feel a bit snappier. So we're going to hit yes on this. We're not going to customize the default import alias. And once that's done, it's going to go ahead and install the dependencies that you need to start your Next.js application. Once this is done, we can cd into that folder I just created. So for me, it is cd my first -blog. Like so. And then we can open up VS Code with code. There we go. Now VS Code has opened up with my first blog project. You'll see a couple of folders in here already and the config done for us. The main ones to know are obviously it's got the Tailwind config set up for us. And then we also have our files in app, and we have page.tsx, which is going to be the beginning page. So if I go and create a new terminal here, if we then do pnpm run dev within that folder, you're going to see that it's going to launch, and it will say localhost 3000 on here. And if we open up this link, you'll see that we have our application here and this main page here. So any page without a slug is this first page.tsx in the app folder here. So we can go ahead and edit this, and we'll see our changes being made on the side here. Now it does have global CSS, and obviously it has some defaults in here to style this page for us. We're going to go ahead and overwrite them now when we install shadcn UI. So to install shadcn UI, go to ui.shadcn.com. We're going to click this menu, and we're going to go to the installation section. It's going to ask what framework you're using. We're going to hit Next.js. We've done the create project step, so we can now run the command line interface. So if you're using npm, you're obviously going to be using this npx command. If you're not, click on this button, and then you can copy it for your package manager. So with that command copied, I'm going to open up a terminal here. I'm going to open up a new one, as you don't need to stop the dev server for this. And then I'm going to paste that command in, and the command line interface is going to install, and it's going to ask us a couple of questions. Now, this isn't a shadcn UI tutorial, but it's going to ask you what style you'd like to use, and just to show you quickly, if you go to any of the components, you'll see there's a little style picker here, and you can choose between New York and default. The main difference seems to be New York looks a little more compact, and it won't actually change the outcome of this tutorial based on what you select there. So, but I'm going to leave it as default, and the same with the color scheme, I'm going to leave it as slate, and you can actually see the colors if you come into themes here and click customize. You can see some of the example based colors, but you can customize this a lot further, and that's a bit out of scope of this project, but you can go into these theming documentation and see how he does it with CSS variables. I'll briefly mention it a bit later on, but to be honest, to get started, you can even Google shadcn UI generators, and they'll come up with a load of color scheme sort of pickers for you, and I'll show you how you can change that later. So would you like to use CSS variables? Hit yes. And then it may ask you where your Tailwind config is stored, and you do want to watch out that it has .ts at the end and not .js. Now, it seems like the command line interface here has picked it up for us, but sometimes I've seen that it will ask where your Tailwind config is. And again, just make sure that you're using tailwind.config.ts, not .js. So now that that's done for us, it has changed a couple of things. It's gone in and changed the global CSS, as I mentioned. So this is how theming is done in shadcn UI. Instead of using the Tailwind colors like background blue 500, for example, we're going to use background, where the color here is defined in the HSL color scheme. If you've never used that color scheme before and you're used to things like RGB colors, it's actually really simple. If you type in your RGB color into Google, it will come up with a color picker. And you can actually see the HSL color here. So we would change this to 0, space 0%, space 0%. Just don't add in the commas. So that's how you can easily convert between RGB and HSL there. Again, as I said, you can Google shadcn UI theme generators and then choose with a color picker for a lot of those sites, and you'll get a cool interface to pick your colors. But this is how we change colors, and we're essentially going to use this for anywhere we want a color in our application. The benefits of this are that firstly, if we want to change the color across our whole website, we change it in one place. We don't have to go find all the instances of background blue 500. And the other one is this at the moment in this root selector is going to be your light theme. Now, if we minimize this, you'll see there's also a .dark. This is all of the colors for your dark theme. So it's the exact same variables, except the colors you want to put here are the ones that you want for your dark theme. And that's how we have a really nice and easy switch between light mode and dark mode. And it means we don't have to use the dark Tailwind selector on everything where we want a color. So it's a really good way to handle your light mode and dark mode using Tailwind. And shadcn UI gives you that by default. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we'll scroll down. Obviously, we have done this bit here, but we're going to set up our fonts here. If we go into our layout.tsx, you'll see that the Next.js default has actually provided us with the font setup there. So we do have Inter, but we do need to adjust this slightly to work with Tailwind. So come after this subsets Latin bit and then do variable. And then once you've done that, add the variable to be font-sans. Again, similar to the instructions that shadcn has got here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come down to the class name and delete this. And then we're going to use a function called cn that shadcn also installed for us in this libutils folder. Now, the cn function is really simple. It involves Tailwind merge and cosx. Tailwind merge essentially just helps you out with Tailwind. So if you had something like background blue 500 and background red 500, if you put this on a class name, it would be confusing which color would actually apply. You might do this by accident, or if you're doing, say, if you had is danger and you wanted to apply red, what will happen is whichever one is first in the CSS selector or last, will apply. So it's a bit confusing. What Tailwind merge will do is make sure there's always only one. And it has another couple cool features, like if you have a padding top one and a padding bottom one, when it goes through Tailwind merge, it actually just makes it padding Y1 for you. And then the CLSX is how we can handle adding in conditional class names. So essentially what you can do is things like background red 500, and then you'd have is true within that cn function. And this would obviously be a Boolean for if it's in danger or something. And that's how you can apply conditional classes. You'll see this a bit later on, but we're not going to use it too much. But here we're just going to use it to combine some class names. So what we're going to do here is cn, and then we're going to follow along pretty much with what the instructions have in shadcn's tutorial here. We're going to do min, height, screen, and then we're going to do background, and then font-sans, and then anti-aliased. Now this anti-alias bit essentially just makes sure that the font looks good on certain devices. You don't need to worry about it too much. And then the font sans bit here, obviously we're setting the font to be this inter font everywhere. But the next bit we need to do within this cn function here is add in inter.variable. And there we go, we should be set up to use our inter font across our application now. The next bit we need to do is add the font to our Tailwind config, however. So we're going to go into the Tailwind config.ts. Underneath here with import type, we're going to do import, and then we're going to do font family, and that's going to be imported from Tailwind CSS/default theme. Now come down to this extend here, just above colors, we're going to add font family. And then in here, we're going to add sans, so that's going to be the name of our font. So when we're using Tailwind, we'll do font-sans, as you saw. We're going to make this an array. And the first value is going to be var-font-sans. So we're telling Tailwind to use our font sans variable for the sans font. And then if not, we're going to use the expand bit here, and we're going to do font family.sans. So this is going to fall back to the Tailwind default in this array. And we're just expanding it here, so this array is merged with this one. Put a comma there, and that will complete our Tailwind config there. Another thing I do want to point out, if we go back to this utils, you may see this error where it says it can't find the module, even though shadcn UI should have installed it for you. You can actually do Control-Shift-P, and you might want to do this if you see a TypeScript error that you're pretty sure you've solved, but it's not going away. And as you see there, we can simply type restart TS server. And if you do that, you may notice the errors go away like it has for me there. Sometimes it just seems a bit slow to catch up with some of the changes that you've made. There we go, so we've done that font family setup now, and you'll see a bit about the app structure here. So as we install some shadcn UI components, it's going to go into a folder called components, and then into another folder called UI. And as I said there, it created that utils folder for us. And that is it. We can go ahead and install our components. The other thing I want to point out is if you did choose the New York theme, you're going to be using Radix UI icons. That's the bit that's going to change in the code, whereas we're using Lucid React if you used the default theme. Not much to worry about really, as you can just use either. It's personal preference on what icon library to use. We are now going to go ahead and install the button component, however, so do the same thing. MPX shadcn UI at latest to add button. We're going to hit copy here, and I'm going to copy the pm command instead. I'm going to pull up our terminal again and paste in that command. And now when this is done, what you'll notice is we've added a button.tsx into our components UI here. So we're now using a shadcn UI button. And again, with that error there, you're seeing that it's showing that it can't find that thing. Do Control-Shift-P, hit restart server, and it goes away. There we go. It's a bit weird why that error occurs sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't, but as I said there, just restart the TypeScript server if you're finding annoying errors that don't seem to go away that you're pretty sure are solved. So here we have the shadcn UI button. We don't need to learn too much about the code in this, as I said, this isn't a shadcn UI tutorial. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is save all of this as stage 1, add shadcn. That's just so you can follow along in the commit messages. If you're doing this, you can go to the GitHub repo and see what we did at each chapter of this YouTube tutorial. So I hit commit there. The next thing that I want to do is actually install Velite. Now, we're not going to get around to using it just yet, but we are going to install it and make sure that it's all set up for us. So to do that, we're going to go over to their documentation, which is velite.js.org. Obviously, links will be in the description. We're going to hit get started. And again, we're going to have to install some commands here. So it's going to say, whichever package manager you're using. I'm using pm, so we're going to copy that. And it's going to install Velite as a dev dependency here. Once this is installed, we're going to create a new file outside of everything, so on the same line as all of your other configs. And this is going to be called velite.config.ts. Now that we've got this, we can go in here and we're going to import a couple things at the top of our file quickly. This is going to be import define config, define collection, and then S. And that's going to be from Velite, like so. If I minimize this. Now that we've done that, we're going to define our first collection. To do this, we're going to make our first collection posts, as all we're going to be doing is having our blog posts in this collection. This is then going to be define collection, and then you do your brackets and then your curly brackets. And then in here, we're going to do name, and the name is going to be post. The pattern is going to be essentially the files we're looking for within a content folder that we'll set up later. And that's going to be, it's all going to be stored in a folder called blog. And then you do /*/star.mdx. This essentially just looks in the folder or any nested folder for any file with an MDX extension, because that's what we're going to be using for our Markdown. And now we need to define the schema for the posts object here. So to do that, we use the S bit that we imported earlier. We do .object. We open that up and then do curly brackets here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a slug. So when we call our post objects, we should be able to get a slug out of each one, which is essentially where the URL is. So to do that, all we have to do is s.path, and that defines that schema for us. Then we're going to add a title, and this is going to be something that we're going to add to our Markdown front matter ourselves, so we can get the title of the blog post. And we're just going to say that is a string with a maximum length of 99. So .max 99 there. And then we're going to do a description as well. So description. And what we're going to do with that is s.string. And then we're going to make this a maximum of 999 as well. And what we're going to do at the end of here is make this optional, as you may not always want to give your blog post a description. And this way it is optional. We're going to do date. So this is going to be the date that we want to show as sort of published on our website, so we can filter by date and see what the newest blogs are. We're also going to add a published boolean, and what this is going to do essentially is, if you want to upload sort of a blog post but you don't want it to appear on your site yet, but you just sort of want to see it working behind the scenes, we can add this so that it doesn't show up on the site unless this boolean is true. And we're going to set it to default true, so that you have to set it as false if you don't want it to show up, and by default it's true. Next, what we're going to do is we need a body, and this is going to be all of the content of our Markdown file essentially, and that's going to be s.mdx, like so. And there we go, that is essentially your first post here. We add our comma here. That is your first collection in Velite sorted. Now what we do want on this is when we get this slug back with this path here, the path's actually going to be blog / and then let's say hello world. What we want to add is a field that can sort of take away that /blog bit. Then we're going to do this using computed fields. So to do this, we'll come above the post bit. We'll do const computed fields. And this is going to equal, and then in TypeScript, we're going to do t extends, and then slug :string. And then we'll close that off for TypeScript. And then we're going to do data shift.t. And then we'll do an inline function like so that immediately returns this object here. So as you'll see here, this is the TypeScript that's essentially saying we want to make sure our data has the slug object on it. And then data here is just going to be off that type t there. And then in here, what we're going to do is expand the data object like so. And then we're going to add a new field called slug as params. And this is going to be calculated off of that data, as I said earlier. So what we're going to do is data, and we know it has slug because that's how we've defined it in our TypeScript. So .slug. We're going to split it on our first slash, so as I showed you earlier with that /blog /hello world. So if this was our hello world blog post, we're going to split it on that first slash, and then we're going to slice it on 1. So that's going to cut out the array, this side of it. So it's going to cut out that blog side of it. And then we're going to join everything back up with slashes again, just to catch any nested ones, like so. And there we go. That's our computed fields bit done. And now to use this computed fields within our posts object down here, we're going to have to come onto this schema bit here and do .transform, and then pass in computed fields. If you're a bit confused what this computed fields bit is doing, essentially it's allowing us to read any of this data and then add a field that's calculated based on the data or the value of these instead. Because if you just do it from here, you can't reference body. So this would allow you, if you wanted to do something with the date or description, for example, to do it there, as we've done with slug. We've modified slug based on the value of slug itself. So that's how you do that computed field section. The next bit we're going to want to do is export our config. So let's do export default, define config, and then in here we're going to do function again, and then our curly brackets. We're going to say the root is going to be content. So this is the folder it's going to look in for the folder blog and the Markdown files, for example. So for us, we're going to put that in a folder called content. We're going to add output. Now in our output, we're going to have data, and that's going to be .velite. This is the folder that it's looking for. We're going to add assets, and then we're going to do public /static. We're going to do base, and that's going to be /static/ add in a name, which is essentially a template. So if we come in here and do, you're going to want to do essentially the square brackets here. You're going to do name dash hash and then a :6. That's hash there. And then we're going to do dot and then the square brackets again, ext. Once we've done that, underneath name, we're going to do clean as a boolean true. Come outside of this and then add a new key to the define config, and that's going to be collections. And in this, we're going to put curly brackets, and then we're going to put an object that has our posts in it. So our collections is including this posts collection that we created earlier. And there you'll go, you'll see the collection has been added and that TypeScript error has gone away there. So as you can see, this is essentially setting up where we're going to store our Velite stuff. This is where the static assets are going to be stored. So it's going to store them in this public folder and then in a static folder if you have them. We're not actually utilizing this feature, so you can just go ahead and set it up as I have. The last bit that we're going to want to do is do MDX. And then in here, we're going to do an object, and that's going to have rehype plugins, which is going to be an empty array. And then we're going to do remark plugins, which is also going to be an empty array. We're going to come in here later and add in some plugins to make our code blocks look nice and cool. But for now, that's all you need to do for this bit of the setup. The next bit is tying it in to Next.js. To do that, we need to go into our next config. Let's go into your nextconfig.mdjs here. And we're going to go into the documentation here and click on integration with Next.js. Now we're going to copy the command code they have here for their next config. Because we don't have any changes we've made in our next config, we can copy that default one. But you are going to watch out. You want to copy the ESM one if you started a new Next.js 14 application. And we're going to copy that. So make sure you're clicking on ESM here. Copy that. Or you can just copy it from my GitHub, as I said. So we're going to paste that in. Essentially what this is doing is it's just modifying Next.js to make sure that it runs this Webpack plugin for us, which is going to build all of our Velite stuff for us and allow us to access that data in our project. Another thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to .gitignore and just add a hashtag here and say Velite files. And then we're going to add .velite to our gitignore as well, as you don't want that being pushed up with your git, as that's just another build file. So if we put .velite in there, and it won't recognize that as our git changes. So now that we've done that, let's add some example content so we can play around with some stuff later. To do that, we're going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this folder content. And then in this folder, we're going to have a folder called blog. And then in this blog folder, we're going to add in a hello world MDX file. So it's going to be hello-world.mdx. Now, this is a good point to point out the VS Code extensions. So if you go into your extensions, there is an MDX extension, which just gives VS Code some more ability for, or language support for MDX. So it will make highlighting sort of code blocks in your MDX a bit better. So there you go. You can install that and you have much better usability of MDX within VS Code. To get started in this hello world.mdx, you could obviously just copy my one from the GitHub, but what we're going to do is we're going to add a title, and that's going to be hello world. Now, if you remember from our schema earlier, these were some of the fields that we said it needed, and these are the fields that we supply ourselves and that Velite doesn't calculate for us. So that's title and description. And I'm just going to put this is our first blog post. We're going to add a date for when you want this sort of published. So we're going to add 2024. I'm going to put 03/06. This is in the ISO format. You can actually put the hours here as well if you wanted to, but we're just going to leave it as the year, month, and day. Next, we're going to do that published boolean, but again, this would be true by default, but we're going to put published true here just so that if we copy and paste this to other files, we have it. And now we're going to write some Markdown. So I'm going to put a heading 1, hello world, welcome to my blog. So again, this isn't a Markdown tutorial, but we'll just put in some basic Markdown there, and you'll see we have content and blog there. We have our Velite config set up. And now another thing you might want to do is rerun your next config. So I'm going to do pm run dev, so stop the one you had running. Then you can do pm run dev. You'll see that Velite is now tied in, and it says watching for changes in content. The last thing we're going to do for our Velite config is we're going to go into tsconfig.json. And then we're going to add in a new alias here. So underneath paths here, what you're going to want to do is add a hashtag site/content. And that is going to be an alias to the folder that we created earlier, which is .velite. So make sure you include that second dot there. So it's ./.velite. Again, that's essentially just import aliasing .velite up here, so we can actually do #site/content when we want to import things from that folder. And that's how you import your blog posts, and you'll see that a bit later. So if I go ahead and save that, that is Velite set up, and we'll be using it a bit later. So let's go into our Git here, and I'll save that here as stage 2 setup Velite. I'm going to commit that. And now what we're going to move on to is creating our site header, and then we'll get started with creating our blog pages. So firstly, I'm going to close the Velite documentation here, as we wouldn't be needing that. And we're going to go back to our localhost 3000. Now you will see the dark mode support has probably disappeared, and some of the styling has disappeared. That's because, as I said, shadcn UI has overwritten what we had in our styling. But the first thing we're going to want to do is go into our layout.tsx. When we're in our layout.tsx, as you see earlier, we did that inter.variable bit. Now, to explain the layout.tsx, essentially it's going to wrap everything in your application with this HTML or JSX that you put here. So this is a good place to put your site header and site footer. And it uses the app router file-based routing. So when you just have a file in here called layout.tsx, if you have one at the app level, it's your root layout, so it's going to wrap all of the website. You can even put a layout.tsx in different folders, which will configure the layout for that. But that's outside of the scope of this tutorial. Essentially, all you need to know, as I said, is this is going to wrap the whole application. And as you see, we have our HTML and body tag in here, as this is the root layout. To get started with some of the layout, what we're going to do is we're going to add a div. I'm going to give this class name relative. I'm going to give it flex min height of dvh. Now, this is actually a difference from min height screen. I'm going to put up some pictures now of what the difference between min height screen is and min height dvh. But essentially, dvh is what's displayed to the user, so the displayed viewport height, whereas screen is the whole viewport height. The only real difference in this tends to be on Safari. On iOS, you'll see, because the navigation bar is at the bottom, if you have the screen, if you have this as min height screen, the footer would technically be hidden by that navigation bar. If you have it DVH, the footer will always appear above that navigation bar. It's not going to matter too much if you have scrolling on your site, so it only really matters on pages that just need to be the exact height of a screen. But we're going to leave this as min height DVH. I'm going to do flex-col, and I'm going to do background. Now, inside of this div here, we're also going to add a main tag. I'm going to give that class name flex-1. With that closed off, what we're going to do in here is curly brackets children. And then we're going to go ahead and delete this one down here. So essentially what this styling is doing is it's taking up the whole page. It's making it flex column layout, so they're stacked on top of each other. And then this flex one here is ensuring that the main content of our application grows to fill all of the remaining space of the page. This is where we're now going to add in our site header. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go to page.tsx, and we're actually going to delete everything in this main block here. And then we're just going to add in something new called a section. And within this section, we're going to do hello world. That's because some of these stylings will overwrite our header and we want them to disappear. So if we do that, we can also delete this default import here and save that. Looks like I might have to refresh the page to get that to recompile. But there you go. Sometimes it does update, sometimes it doesn't. Here you go. We see our new page has hello world, and we got rid of all of the content that was on there before. The next thing we're going to do is actually create a site config file. So we go down here and we do new folder, and this shouldn't be in the app folder. This should be at the root level. So as I said, outside of everything here. So we have our config folder here. And then in config, I'm going to do new file and call it site.ts. Now we're going to treat this file as essentially sort of like a local configuration. It's just going to contain some important like names and links about our site. And the reason we do it in here is so you can change it again in one place, but you can reference it everywhere across the application. We're going to do export const site config, lowercase site there. And that's going to equal an object. The first one, we're going to do a name, and that's just going to be the name of your website. For me, I'm going to do Jollyblog. We're going to do a URL, and this should be the public URL for your website. If you don't know that yet, like we don't, we can leave it as example.com. Then we're going to do a description. And here we'll put NextJS 14 blog using Velite, Tailwind, and shadcn. Going to add an author, so just your name. And then we're going to add a new section called links. So that's going to be an object, and this is going to have a few links in it, like Twitter. And then we're going to add a GitHub link. And then you can also go ahead and add any other links you want here. I'm going to add a personal site link as well, because this isn't my personal site. And then what you can do is obviously copy and paste in the various links for you. So let me just do that here. So there we go. We have my Twitter link, my GitHub link, and my personal site link. So as I said, this is just so we can choose this in one place. Say you updated your Twitter username or something. You could come in here and change it once, and you wouldn't have to change it everywhere we've referenced a link to Twitter. We come in here, we're going to also export the type of this site config. So we're going to do export type site config with a capitalization there. And that's going to equal type of site config. So it's going to be the type of the site config const that we created up here. That's just so we can use TypeScript on this, so we can actually use the site config if we're expecting a value, for example. But it's good practice to do that. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and get started creating our site header. To do that, we're going to come in components, and make sure you're doing this in the components folder and not the UI folder. We're going to create a new file called siteheader.tsx. And then in here, we're going to do export function site header, like so. And then once we're in the site header, we'll use the semantic tag header, like so. And again, I'm just going to put the text hi in here. And the reason we're going to do that is so that I can go into my layout.tsx here. And above this main tag now, we're going to import that site header component. So we do site header. And that's going to come from /header, as we just created that file. And again, this is the import alias that just means the root level of your application. Now that we've got site header, we actually need to make sure this is a return header here and not just header. And that makes it a valid JSX component, and that will get rid of that error. So there you go. We see at the top of our application now, we've got hi, and this would appear on every single page we had. Let's go ahead and actually fill this out with something useful and add some styling into it. To get started with that though, what I'm going to do as well is create an icons component. Let's come to components and do icons.tsx. And now this is common practice that you'll see in a lot of Next.js applications, to just have your SVG icons in a component like this. We're first going to define what the props of our icon component should be. And because we're using SVG, that's just going to be react.html attributes. And then you're going to do SVG element inside these brackets here. Now to add in our icons, what we're going to do is export const icons. Now this is actually going to be an object of React components. And our first one is going to be our logo. To do that, we're going to give this an inline function and an inline component. So it's going to be brackets props, and that's going to be off that icon props that we created earlier. And then we're just going to do equals to, and that's going to paste in the SVG for our logo. And then make sure you're putting this props bit on here. Also, if you're pasting in an SVG, make sure to change the props here to React-based props, because you probably have something that looks like this. You're going to want to change it to, instead of the dash, to make it capitalized like that. And then this ... props here means we can pass through any props we want on our logo to the SVG, like so. And this is how we pass through stuff like Tailwind class names, which you'll see us use a bit later. The next two that I'm going to paste in are the Twitter and GitHub link or logo. So I'm going to paste them in. Again, you can go and get them from my code, because it's just the Twitter and GitHub logo. And it's the same thing as before, where we have that ... props bit. And that is our icons set up, so we can go ahead and start using them. So I'm going to go back to my site header now. And in the site header, we're going to start adding some design to this. So with header, we add a class name in. We're going to add sticky. Is this going to be a sticky header that's always at the top, which is top 0. It's going to have a width of full, a border B, border dash border, background, background. But then we're going to do /95. So that's going to be the opacity of it. We're going to add a backdrop blur, which adds that cool glass effect. But then we're also going to do a interesting one with Tailwind, which is supports. And then in here, backdrop filter. So backdrop dash filter. And then if it does support a backdrop filter, we're actually going to have a background of background, but /60 instead. What this is essentially doing in Tailwind is saying that if that device supports the backdrop filter CSS functionality, make the background 60 opacity instead, and that's going to make that glass effect look a little bit cooler. We're going to go ahead and save all of that. Now you can actually see what this is doing if you're using the Tailwind CSS IntelliSense extension, so I highly recommend that, as it will show you underneath the hood sort of what each value does. But now we've got that header bit in, we're going to go ahead and add in a div here. Get rid of this extra bit here. In this div, we're going to give this a class name, and then we're going to add container, flex, height 14, max width screen 2XL, and then items center. If you haven't seen the container bit in Tailwind before, it adds padding sort of based on the width of your screen, and then that max width screen 2XL is just ensuring that our navbar doesn't get too large on people's site so that our links aren't really far apart from each other if they're on like a 4K screen or something. Now that we've done that, you'll see that we've got our navbar up here with that border bottom. We're going to add in another div inside of here, however. So add in another div, give this a class name of flex, flex-1, items-center, justify end, space -x-2. There we go. And then within this div, we're finally going to add a nav. So using the nav semantic tag, and that's going to be flex items-center. There we go. We'll go ahead and save that. Now what we can do is add in our first link to our navbar, and we're actually going to add in the GitHub and Twitter links first that are going to sit on the right here. To do that, we're going to import link from next/link. So it's import link from next/link. We're going to add a href of site config. So import that from the one we created earlier from @/config/site.links.github. And then we're going to do target, and that's going to equal _blank. Now what this does is just make sure it opens in a new tab, and we're going to do relationship or rel and then no referrer. So no referrer, no referrer. What this does is essentially a privacy thing that it won't tell the site, or it's not supposed to tell the site who referred them there. So when we click on GitHub, they don't know your site sent them there. It's just an optional thing you can add. Now that we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to add in the icon we created earlier around a button. To do that, we're going to have a div. We're going to do a class name. And now we're going to change this for curly brackets, and we're going to use that cn function that we called earlier. So we import cn from @lib/utils. And then in here, we're going to use a button variants function that shadcn UI will have installed with the button component. So when you type in button variants there, you'll see that the import is import button variants from /UI, and that's because we're in the components folder. It can reference shadcn components with /. So it's going to be button variants, and then we're going to use this as a function, and in that function, we're going to pass through an object which has the variant, and then the variant we're going to want for shadcn. So our variant of shadcn button we're going to use is ghost, so we're going to add it like that. And then outside of the button variants function, but still in the cn function, we're going to add a couple of class names, and that's going to be width of 10, px-0, and we'll leave it like that for now. And make sure you close off that div, or you'll get an error like so. So now that we've closed off that div, we need to add in our icon. To do that, we're going to reference that icons object we called earlier. So import icons from /icons. Then on this, you actually just do .github, and then we'll add a class name, and we can use this as a component now. And the class name I'm going to add is going to be h4w4. And then we can make this self-closing. And there you go, you see the GitHub icon has appeared up there. And the last thing you want to do is help out some screen readers here. So we can do span class name, sr-only, which is a Tailwind functionality. And then we're going to give this GitHub. What this is doing is you'll never see this on your site, but if they're using a screen reader, it will read it out where applicable so that a screen reader can understand, or someone using a screen reader, what this button actually does, as we don't have any text on it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to copy and paste this for our Twitter link. So copy and paste all of that link that you have there, and we'll change everything that said GitHub to Twitter. So it's these two bits here, and we'll go ahead and save that. And then you're also going to want to change that icon there to use the Twitter icon we created earlier. There we go. We have our two buttons for GitHub and Twitter shown up there using the link tag. The next thing we're going to want to do is add in our logo here, and also the blog and about links. To do that, what we're actually going to do is create a new component. And the reason we're creating a new component here is we're going to utilize some client-side only features. So at the moment, this is actually a server component, as we haven't used a directive at the top that tells it it's a client component. But what we can do is where we want client functionality, we can just separate it out into another new component. So we do that now. If I do new file, then I do main-nav.tsx. And then in main-nav.tsx, what we're going to do at the top of it is add in a new directive called useClient. Now, this is a server component-based directive that essentially says this is going to have some client functionality in it. So this is a client-only component. It will actually render on the server, but again, that's a whole other can of worms that we're not going to open in this tutorial. For now, you need to know, essentially, if you're using things like hooks in React or different functionality that is based on client-side information, like the page they're on or buttons they click, you're going to want to add the useClient directive. You'll pretty quickly find out in Next.js, as if you try and use a component that needs the useClient directive, it will tell you. To get started in here, we're going to do export function main nav. And then we're going to open this up. And then what we're going to return here, again, I'm just going to return a nav, like so. So it's going to use the nav tag. But what we're going to do again is we're going to go back to our site header component. And then in our site header component, what we're going to do is we're going to add in the main nav in here so that we can see the changes as we make them. So if we expand this div here, and I do site header. So if we expand this div here, and I do main nav, and we import that from that component we just created, and we'll make that a self-closing JSX component. Now that we've done that, we can go back to our main nav, and as we start to edit, we'll see things appear on our header here. So back in our main nav here, what we're first going to do is we're going to add a class name on here, and we'll add some styling. Styling is going to be flex items-center space-x-4, and then what we're going to do is use this large directive from Tailwind, and we'll make it space-x-6. If you haven't seen this before in Tailwind, essentially what it's saying is if the width of the screen is above 1024 pixels or 1024 pixels, just add a different class name onto it instead. This is how we add support for sort of mobile styling, and then how you make it a really responsive website. Again, this isn't a Tailwind tutorial, so I'll skip over that bit for now, but that's sort of a brief introduction to what you'll be seeing on a lot of this application. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add a link. Now, this is going to be our logo, so we're going to wrap it in a link because it's common practice to just make your logo go back to the home page. So we'll put the href as /, and we'll add a couple of class names to this. So the styling on this is going to be mr6 flex items-center and then space x2. And then within this link, what we're going to do is we're going to import our logo. So we added our logo from the icons section. So if I import icons here from /icons, and then we'll use our logo. And then I'm going to add a class name here, and I'm actually going to give this a height of 6 and a width of 6. And then we can self-close that. And then again, I'm going to add a span here, but this span is just going to be the site name. So I'm going to give this a class name of font-bold, and then close this off. But for the site name, again, we're going to use this name we defined in our site config. So I'm going to do siteconfig.name, like so. Now we actually need to import the link from next/link there. That's what that error is showing us. So there we go. You'll see that we've got our website link here, and if we click it, it will go back to the home page, but obviously we're already on that. So that's the first bit done. Now we need to add a couple links to some pages that we're going to create in the future. First one is going to be a link. That's going to be a href to /blog. So this is going to take us to our blog page. Then we're going to add a class name on here, and the class name is going to use curly brackets, and then we're going to do cn. Within cn, we're going to do text-small, font-medium, transition-colors, and then we'll add a hover effect with hover, and then you use your colon, text-primary, and then we'll leave it like that. Now, the next thing we want to do is change the color off of the link based on whether that's on the page or not. To do that, we actually need to import path name. So we're going to do const path name equals use path name. Now, make sure you're importing this from next/navigation. So it's import use path name from next navigation. And now we've got that, we can come to cn and we can do some of that conditional path name logic. So what you can do in here is we add a comma after this string of class names we have. Then what we're going to do is add path name and then triple equals. So if path name equals blog, what we'll do is we'll then do a ternary. So we'll say if path name does equal blog, we'll do text-foreground. And then we'll do our semicolon. So this is if it doesn't equal blog, text-foreground. But then we're going to do /60 to change the opacity of it a bit. Now we need to import our cn function. So again, you import that from your @lib/utils. Now we've got that, we need to close off our link tag here, like so. Now that we've closed that off, we can just put in the name of the link. So for our case, it's going to be blog. Now what we've done here is we've got that transition colors and that hover effect. So it'll have a nice hover effect when we hover over it. And again, whether you're on the page or not, if you're on the page, it would look a bit more like this. And if you weren't on the page, it grays it out a bit like that. So you can indicate to the user which page they're currently on. We're going to copy and paste this logic here in this blog link to create our about link, and then just change where it says /blog in both of these instances to /about, and then change this bit here to about. Like so. And there we go. We've got the header bit here with blog and about. We go back to our site header here. What we actually need to add now is support for the mobile site. So if I inspect element on here, you'll see that it sort of doesn't fit on a mobile. If we go into DevTools here and I expand this window, you'll see that everything's going to get a bit bunched up as we don't have support for our mobile site yet. So let's go ahead and add a mobile sidebar instead. So when you click on a menu, it pulls out a menu. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to commit everything, however, as stage 3 site header. And then we can move on to the next stage, which is adding in that mobile menu. To add in our mobile menu, what we're actually going to be doing is using a shadcn UI component for the sheet. So to do that, we're going to go back to ui.shadcn.com, scroll down until you see the sheet component, or you can copy the command that we're about to paste in. So again, if you're using MPX, you're going to be copying that command. We're going to be using pmpm, so paste that into your terminal, and that will add the sheet component for us, and that's how we're going to get our sliding sidebar like this. Let's go back to our application here. So now that we have that, we can create a new one called mobile nav. Let's go into components, new file, mobile-nav.tsx. And then in mobile-nav, we're going to add the use client directive again, as this is going to be using some hooks and it needs some client-side logic. So we're going to be doing use client, export function main nav, or mobile nav, sorry, like so. And then in here, what we're going to do is the first thing is create some state. So we're going to have const open and then set open. And this is just going to equal to React's use state. And then we're going to give it false by default, as we don't want the sheet to be open. Import use state from React there. And then in here, we're going to do return. And this is where we're going to start using some shadcn components. So the first one I'm going to use is sheet. Now make sure when you're doing this, you import it from your shadcn installed components. Sometimes you'll pop up with radix components, and sometimes, as you see it says here, there's even an icon for sheet. But we're going to import it from .ui/sheet. We're going to give it a couple props, and that's going to be open, and that's just going to be open. And then on open change, and that's just going to be the set open prop or state that we created earlier. Like so. The next thing we're going to use is sheet trigger. So import that from the same place, and then you're going to put the as child prop on here, like so. Then we're going to put a button inside of all of this, and that's going to be imported from the shadcn button component, so .ui/button. We're going to give it a variant, and the variant I'm going to use for this is outline. And then we're going to give it a class name of width 10 and padding x 0, like so. Next thing we're going to do is we're also going to add small hidden on here. So if we add sm hidden onto here, this is, as I said, with Tailwind. What this is doing is saying if the screen size or width is bigger than 640, hide this button. And that's how we're going to choose or switch between the mobile nav and the main desktop nav that we've designed up here. And we'll go back to our site header component and hide these if it's small as well. So within this button, however, what we're going to do is we're just going to use the menu icon from Lucid React. If you're using New York, you're going to be using it from Radix icons, but we're going to add menu. We're going to give this class name height 5 and width of 5, and then we'll self-close that. And again, we're going to add a screen reader span here. So span class name SR only, and then we'll do toggle theme. That's just again so this announces it correctly to screen readers what this button actually does. Now that we've done that, what I'm going to do is go back to site header quickly, and then we're going to change some of these links so that they hide correctly. If we go down to our link GitHub and link ghost, I'm actually going to leave these two here, or we'll go to class name here where it says width 10 and padding x 0. We're going to put hidden, so it's hidden by default. So you'll see when we save that it's hidden. But then we're going to do small and then inline dash flex, SM inline flex. So now if this page reaches a size big enough for it, you'll see that that button will reappear. Now we're going to do the same thing for this button down here as well. So it's going to be hidden and then SM hidden, like so. And we'll go ahead and save that. And we're also going to do the same thing to these two buttons here, blog and about. But first we're going to import our mobile nav. So we come down to the bottom here, and then you're going to go 2 divs up, so underneath this nav link here. What we're going to do is we're going to create a mobile nav. Actually, we're going to put it inside of the nav here. So underneath this link here, we'll do mobile, import the mobile nav component we just created. So mobile nav from /mobile nav. And again, that's going to be a self-closing tag. And the reason we'll do that is now we can see some of the changes we make. So you should see your menu button appears up there. As I said, now we're going to go into main nav. So let's go to main nav.tsx. And we're going to add that same hiding logic to our 2 links here. So it's going to be hidden and then small. But this one's going to be inline dash block. And you'll see that will disappear. And we'll do the same for this one. Hidden, small, inline dash block. And there we go, those 2 will disappear. So we're just left with our logo and our button here that will open up on mobile nav. So let's go and create our mobile nav now. Go back to your mobile nav component. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to add some sheet content now. So this is actually the content of our thing. Inside of your sheet component and underneath sheet trigger, we're going to do sheet content. And again, import from that same place, .ui/content. We're going to do side. And this side is going to equal to right, as we want it to appear from the right side where our button is. And then within sheet content, what we're going to do is we need to create a mobile link. To do this, we're actually going to create a new component in the same folder here. So we'll come down here, and first we'll create the interface for the props we want for this. So it's going to be mobile link props. And that's going to extend the link props. This is going to extend link props from next/link. So this is actually just saying this interface has everything that link props can take in, but then we're also going to add some additional features on top of that. Firstly, what we're going to do is we're just going to add children. And that's just going to be React.React node. And then we're also going to do an on-open change. And we're going to make that optional with a question mark here. So with this is actually going to be a function type. So it's going to be open, Boolean, and then it's going to return void. So it's like so. So we've defined on-open change as a function that takes in a prop or an argument of Boolean and then returns void. Now that we've done that, we can create our component. That's going to be function mobile link. And then in here, we're going to expand some props. So we're going to want href. We're going to want that on open change that we referenced earlier. And then I'm going to want some children as well. And then we're going to do ... props. So we're going to expand the props so that we can get them later on. Now that I've done that, we're going to say this is of type mobile link props. And that should sort out the TypeScript error there. Next in here, what we're going to do is const router equals use router. Now this one's really important to make sure you're importing this from next/navigation, not next/router. Once we've got that hook set up, we can go ahead and return a normal link. So we're going to return a link from next/link. Again, that import link from next/link. So you should have this import link and then link props. Inside of this link, what we're going to do is we're going to do href, and that's going to equal href. So we're just passing through that href prop. We're going to add an onClick. Now this onClick is going to be an inline function like so, but we're going to add a couple of lines to here. So this is going to be router.push, and we're actually going to push them to the href.toString. And then this bit here, we're going to do on open change, question mark, dot, and then brackets false. If you've never seen this notation before, it's a way of calling a function that you may or may not know exists. Because if we had it like this, you'll see there'll be a TypeScript error. That's because we made on open change optional. So this could actually be undefined or null. But if you do the question mark dot, it essentially runs the function only if it knows it exists. So it's a really handy sort of inline syntax to do that. Next on this, we're just going to pass through our props like so. So we're going to do the expansion there with ... props, so that just passes through everything else. And then inside of our link, we can also do children, like so. Go ahead and save that, and this is what your mobile link component should do. Now, the reason that we're expanding on the normal link component with this onClick here is because when they click on a web page, or when they click on, say, home, blog, or about, we want it to close the mobile navigation menu. So this just adds in that logic that's going to change it. So when they click on a link, it closes the mobile nav for us. Let's go into our sheet content now and start filling out with our mobile link. The first thing we're actually going to do is add a link again that goes back to our web page, or add in our logo. So we're going to use our new mobile link component, which is inside the same thing. We're going to do a href /, so that's just going to be the home page. And then on this, we're going to do a class name. And the class name on this is going to be flex and item center. And then we'll close that off mobile link. Now it's getting an error here, is actually we need to add class name onto our props down here. So we do class name here. We'll make this optional and let it be a string. And then we'll also continue to pass this through down here. So if I go and add class name here, and then we also need to add a new class name prop onto our mobile link. So then class name, I'm just going to do equals class name, like so. And there we go. That means we can pass through our class name props properly here. Now it will argue that it's missing children here, and that's because we haven't added anything inside of our link just yet. So inside of our link, the first thing we're going to add is that icons.logo, as we want to import our logo that we used earlier. I'm going to add a class name onto this of mr-2, mr-2, a height of 4 and a width of 4, like so. And make that self-closing, and we're going to go ahead and import our logo from /icons here. Now that we've done that, I'm also going to add the text for our site name. So that's going to be the span again, class name, font -bold. And then outside of this, we'll just do from our site config again, siteconfig.name, like so. Now sheet content is saying it's not assignable. Let me just go ahead and restart the TypeScript server, as I think that error is false. And there you go, you see that error has gone away, as it sometimes just gets a little bit confused. But now if you click on your sheet content bit here, you should see that we get our icon appear and Jolly blog appears, and the mobile nav slides in nicely from the right there. Now it does appear that I need to put height 4 on this, as I've done my logo wrong, and there we go, the sizing looks a bit better now. Now we'll add some links to our pages. To do that, we're going to come underneath this mobile link, and we're going to add a new div to contain sort of the column of our links here. To do this, we're going to do flex-col, gap-3, and then margin top of 3, just to add a bit of padding from the top there. Inside of here, let's go ahead and add in some of mobile links. So we're going to do a mobile link. We need to pass through on open change here. And then on open change is going to be set open. And then with this, we're going to do href, and this one is going to be /blog, like so. We're going to make sure we change that on this mobile link. Actually, we forgot to add in that on open change here. So we're going to add on open change is set open. So now we've got that. What we're going to do is, again, we have our mobile link. We need to add some children to this. So this one is just going to say blog and save that. And I'm going to copy this one more time for the about link. So again, we're going to change this bit here to /about, and we'll change this here to about. Go ahead and save that. We open up our menu. We see we have our link to blog and about. Now I'm also going to add in our GitHub and Twitter link back to this. But for GitHub and Twitter, since we don't actually need to close the navbar if you click on them, I'm just going to make them traditional links again. So we're using the link component from next/link here. We're going to add that target equals _blank to make it open in a new page. We're going to add that relationship no referrer. And then we're going to do the href, and that's going to again come from our site config.links. And let's just make this one GitHub for now, like so. And I'm going to just give this the text GitHub. I'm not going to use the logo for this one. So we'll go ahead and save that. And there we go. We've got our GitHub link. And then I'm going to copy and paste this for our Twitter link. So finish this off with Twitter. And then we'll put Twitter at the end here. Don't know where I've just scrolled to on this, but we'll change this link here to Twitter. And we'll go ahead and save that. And there you go. You see we have our mobile navs now. So we have the blog, about, GitHub, and Twitter. And this all comes in when the web page resizes. So if I show you that now, you'll see that it disappears there. It looks like we've actually set something up wrong on the Twitter bar. So if I go back to site header, where I think we have these, it looks like I've forgotten to make it reappear. Yeah, there we go. I've put small hidden on here when this should be inline dash flex. There we go. So it looks normal when we're not on a mobile site. And then let's go down to a mobile size. So if I inspect element here, you can actually use the tools here to see what it looks like on a small mobile, large mobile. You'll see that we use a mobile menu instead. Now what we're going to do is add in our theme picker, so we can now add a dark mode and switch between them. The first thing I'm going to do though is commit all of this as mobile nav. I come in here and I'll say stage 4 mobile nav and commit that. So for our mode toggle, so the button that's going to switch between dark mode and light mode, and just to add the support for that, we're going to install a couple of packages here. First one, you're going to do npm or pnpm install, and it's going to be next-themes. And the next thing we're going to install after this is the shadcn UI drop-down menu. So again, we're going to go to ui.shadcn.com. We're going to find that drop-down menu component. So there we go. We're going to have something looking like this, and we'll copy our command from here. So if you're using npm, it's going to be that one there. We're going to paste that in, and that's going to install the drop-down menu for us. So you'll see it appear in that UI. We've now got 3 shadcn components. We've got the button, the sheet, and the drop-down menu. If I get rid of this now, we're going to create a new component in the components folder called mode toggle.tsx, like so. And then in here, we're going to make it use client again, as we need this to be a client component. We're going to do export function mode toggle, like so. And then the first thing we're going to do is const, and then with our curly brackets here, set theme. And this is now going to use a hook from next/themes. So we're going to use theme, and that's going to be imported from next/themes there. What we're going to do is we're going to do a return. And then from here, we'll add in our drop-down menu. Again, make sure you're importing this from your shadcn UI installed component, not from anything else, as sometimes it offers suggestions for things like radix. We don't want that. Now that we've got this drop-down menu in here, we're going to add in a drop-down menu trigger. So drop-down menu trigger. And with this trigger, we're going to do as child again. Now we're going to add in a button from shadcn UI. So from .ui/button, we're going to give it a variant. And that's going to be ghost. And then we'll give it a class name of width 10 and then padding x 0. Inside of here is where we're going to add our icons for the sun and the moon. So obviously depending on which mode you're in. To do that, what we're going to do is we'll use the sun icon first from Lucid React. Again, if you're using radix, it's probably sun icon instead here. We'll add in a couple of class names. I'm going to give it h1.2 rem. We're using an arbitrary value in Tailwind here. And we'll do width 1.2 rem. We're going to add rotate -0, scale -100, transition all. And now to handle it in dark mode, what we're going to do is dark, and that's going to be -rotate -90 or -90. And then we're going to do dark and scale -0. And we'll go ahead and close this component off. So that's our sun icon in. Next, we're going to add in the moon icon. For that, again, in Lucid, it's just going to be moon. Importing moon and sun from Lucid React there. And now for this class name here, we're going to have absolute. We're going to do height again of 1.2 rem. Width of 1.2 rem. We're going to add a rotate -90 on this. Scale -0. Transition all. Transition -all. And then if it's dark, what we're going to do is rotate -0 and then dark scale -0. This logic here is essentially handling how it displays which icon based on which mode we're in. It means we don't have to write any JavaScript logic to do it. We're doing it with CSS logic, and it's a really neat solution to that. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add a span in here, again, for the screen reader, so SR-only. And we're just going to add toggle theme in here. So if they're on a screen reader, it's going to read that out for us. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our site header. And then in our site header, we're going to add in this mode toggler, just so that we can see what we're working on. We're going to add that in front of mobile nav here. So we're going to add the mode toggle component we just created, imported from that mode toggle that we just created, as I said. Now, if we go back to our website, we should see that we have a nice button here that's currently displaying the sun icon as it's in light mode. What we need to do is we need to add the drop-down menu, and we also need to add support site-wide for this theme. Let's go back to our mode toggle first and work on the drop-down menu. So within here, we need to add some drop-down menu content. So underneath drop-down menu trigger, we're going to do drop-down menu content, drop-down menu content, and then we're actually going to do align equals end, like so. Make sure we're importing this from that same components that we've been importing from before. And then within here, what we're going to do is we're going to add some drop-down menu items. So we're going to do drop-down menu item, and then we're going to add an on-click on this first one. And the on-click is just going to be an inline function that's going to set theme, brackets, and then we'll change this to light. Then in this, what we can do is just write out light. So you can see we're setting the theme to light here. Now if we click this, you'll see our drop-down menu now has that light button in it. And it's going to set the theme to light. And if we copy and paste this through dark and then also system. So let's change this here to dark and this bit here to dark. We'll change this to system and we'll change this bit here to system. Now, if you don't know what system is, essentially it's just saying let the user's operating system decide. So if you have a phone or anything, or even Windows, you can set it to light mode or dark mode. And this just means that it will follow along with what the user's overall preference is. Now you'll see when we're clicking things that nothing is actually going to work yet on these buttons. The reason for that is we haven't added the provider. To do that in Next.js, what we actually need to do is create a new component. We're going to call this providers.tsx. In this providers.tsx, what we're going to do is export function providers. And then this function is just going to take in the prop of children. And that's going to be of type an object, so children, and then React node. So import React node from React, like so. And then all this is simply going to do is return. We're going to do theme provider here, which is imported from Next Themes. We're going to add some props. So attribute is going to be class. So that's telling it to use the class attribute, which we've set up in Tailwind as well. We'll tell it to use system, enable system, and disable transition on change. And then inside of this component, you need to add in your children prop that we've got from earlier. So there we go. We've now got our providers, but at the top of here as well, we need to make this a use client directive. So we type in use client at the top there, like so. And now we need to wrap this around our entire site. And the good place to wrap around the entire site will be in our layout.tsx. So if we go to our layout.tsx, we can now give this provider to every single web page we create within Next.js here. So we're going to do our providers component from components/providers, like so. And we're going to wrap that around this entire div here, like so. So it's inside the body, but wrapped around. And you'll see there that my website has immediately switched to using dark mode. And that's because shadcn has already configured the light mode and dark mode for us. And you can come and click your button here, light or dark. Now I have noticed that the dark or the moon icon seems to be missing. So let's go and bug fix why that is. So if I go back to my mobile nav here, or the mode toggle, sorry. If I look at my moon component, let's see what we've got here. We've got absolute, rotate, scale 0, transition, dark, rotate 0. It's probably this dark scale 0 for moon. I would imagine that's supposed to be scale 100. If I set that to scale 100, there we go. We see our moon icon. Then if we switch to light, we see our light icon. And if I switch to system, because I'm set up to use dark mode, we switch back to dark mode. There we go. That is our Next.js theme switcher added. So I'm going to add this as stage 5. And then just call that theme toggle. Next, we can move on to creating our blog page and getting through some of our blog posts from Velite. So let's get to creating our blog page and pulling through what our blogs actually are from this content folder. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to come into this app folder. We're going to create a new folder within this called blog. Then we'll create a new file within this called page.tsx. So this is a feature of the app router, is it's file-based. So the blog bit here becomes the slug, and then the page.tsx is obviously just the page content. To get started on here, we're going to do export default async function function like so, and we'll call that blog page like so. I'm going to simply return a div quickly from here that just says blog. That's so we can see this in action. So as I said, now that we have blog, we can go to /blog. So if I open up our mobile menu here and we click on the blog page, you'll see that we've now gone to our blog page, but we still have our header and everything because of that layout.tsx is wrapping all of this for us. So we can now configure our blog page to have some content on it. Let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is come in here and add some styling to the blog. If I get rid of this text here, first thing we're going to do is class name. That's going to be container, max width 4XL, padding Y of 6, and then if it's large screen, padding Y of 10. Inside of this div, we're going to add another div. That's going to be class name. This is going to have flex-col, items-start, a gap of 4, and then if it's medium, we're going to have flex-row, and then we're going to have MD, and then justify between. And then we're also going to do MD gap-8. Like so, and then close off that div. And then inside this div, we're going to add one more that says div class name, and this is going to have flex of 1 on it, and then a space -y-4, like so. Inside this div, we're going to add in a heading tag, so we're going to have h1. We'll give this an inline block like so. We'll give it a font, black, text, -4XL, and then we'll add a large, and we'll make that text 5XL. So if it's a large screen, it will just make the text a little bit bigger. And in here we can add blog, like so. And there we go, save it, and our page has that blog heading. Underneath this heading tag here, what we're going to do is add a paragraph tag, so we can add a little description about what our blog is. So if I do P here, and we do class name, we can then come in here and do text-XL, text-muted-foreground. Within this, I can then just put something like my ramblings on all things web dev. There you go, you see we'll get that little description of what our blog's about, so you can just add a little bit about you or a little bit about the content of your blog. Now underneath these two divs here, but within the sort of main div, we're also going to have a HR here, so we're going to have a little heading or a divider. We can do class name here, and that's going to be MT8 for a margin top. And you can actually save this as a self-closing JSX tag here. And you'll see it'll add this nice little line in that will appear there. And again, it will have support for light mode and dark mode. Everything is all working on that front. Now we can actually pull in some of our content. So how do we do that? First, what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top. We're going to say const, and then let's just do posts. And that's going to equal to, or let's say display posts here, const display posts, and this is going to equal to posts. Now what we're going to do is import posts from Velite. So if you remember when we set that up earlier in our schema, we're going to import posts, and that's going to be from, and then it's going to be from that alias we created earlier, site/content. The reason we have this display post bit here is we're going to add some functionality later to sort everything, but for now, let's just get displaying something. Now in here, what we can do is say display posts dot, and then make sure that exists, dot length. And if the length is greater than 0, what we'll do is we'll render out a unordered list, like so. We'll do class name, flex-col. And then in this unordered list is where we'll add the logic for rendering in our blog post. But first, what we'll do is we'll also add the semicolon in our ternary here to what happens if there is no blog post set up yet. So we'll do P. We'll do a P here, and we'll do nothing to see here yet, and save that. So if you don't have any content, it will just show that nothing to see here yet, or if it can't find any. And if it does, we'll display this. Now what we need to do is actually create a component that's going to display our post item in that sort of nice layout. To do that, I'm going to come in components here, and I'm going to do post item.tsx. This just makes it nice and reusable for us. So now that we've got that, what I can go ahead and do is we'll go export function post item, like so. And first we will add an interface up here as well. So the interface is going to be called post item props, and we'll define what we expect on this. So we're going to expect a slug, which has string. We're going to expect a title for the blog post, which is going to be a string. A description, making it optional with the question mark there, a string. And we're going to expect a date, string, like so. Now in our post item, we can use these. So if we add our curly brackets here and then give it a type of post item props, we can come in here and expand this out with title, slug, title, description, and date, like so. Now inside of here, we're just going to return, and we'll use a semantic tag here of article. We'll give the article a class name of flex, flex-col, a gap of 2, a border, and then border-b, and then a padding y of 3, like so. Inside of this article, we're going to add a div. We're not going to style that div. We're going to add a h2 tag with class name, text, -2xl, and a font -bold, like so. And then in this h2, what we're going to do is add a link from next/link, so import from next/link, and we'll make the href of this, and the href of this is going to be equal to slug, so the one we pulled through from earlier. And then in here, we can just add our title. So that's coming from our props there, and we've added title. Now outside of this div here, we're going to add another one. This div here is going to handle our description, so we'll give it a class name of max width none. We'll give it text -muted -foreground, and then we'll just add in the description tag in here, again coming from the props. And then we'll add another div underneath this to help display the date and that little read more sign. So we'll do class name. This is going to be flex, justify between, and then items center. In here, what we're going to do is we're going to add a DL, so it's a semantic tag for sort of some data. We're going to do DT, and then in here, class name SR only, so this is for the screen reader people. We're going to put published on here, so it's just some text that explains obviously what this bit of data is for the person. We're going to do DD, class name, text-small, small. If it's a small screen, we'll do text-base. We'll add a font of medium. We'll do flex, items-center, and we'll add a gap-1, like so. And then within this, we're going to use the calendar icon from Lucid React. So we're going to import calendar from Lucid-React. We're going to add a heading or height of 4 and a width of 4. And then underneath this, we're going to add the time semantic tag as well. We're going to put date time, and that date time is going to equal to the date object that we pulled through. And then after that, we're going to do a date, and we can put in our date in here from the props, like so. Now finally, underneath all of this in our DL here, what I'm going to do is add a link like this, and then we'll have the href again going to slug, and then we'll add a class name, and I'm just going to use the button variants for this. So I'm going to import button variants from that shadcn UI component .ui/button, and I'm going to use the variant in this object here. So we'll do variant, and our variant type is going to be variant of link. And then I'll also pass through some class names. So if we use the cn function here, like so, not cancel animation, we'll add in the cn function around the button variants, and then we'll do a class name here of padding y-0. And make sure to import cn from shadcn UI libutils. And then again, we'll close off this link. And then inside of this link, what I'm going to do is put read more. So this is just going to say read more, and I'll use the arrow emoticon there. And there we go, that is our post item set up for now. So we can go ahead and start using this on our page. So we go back to the blog page we had, so in blog and then page.tsx. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to map over all of our blog posts, and then we can start rendering stuff for it. So inside of this unordered list here, what we're going to do is we're going to do display posts, and then we're going to do .map, and then we'll do post. So that's going to be the name of what we are mapping over. So we'll do post, and then in here we're just going to use the const, and then we'll do slug, we'll do date, title, and description. it's going to equal post. So that's just shorthand destructuring of the object there so that we can reference everything with the actual name of it instead of doing post.slug. Now that we've got that, we're going to make a return. And the return is going to be a list item. And that's going to have a key that's equal to the slug. And then inside of this list item is where we then use our post item that we created a component for earlier. And we'll add in all of the props that we need on that. So it was slug, and then date we can add in as date. We can add in the title as title. And then the description, finally, as, again, the description prop that we have. And then we can make that self-closing there and save that. And there you go, you'll see that our function will render in here. Now, the date's going to look a little bit weird here as we haven't got the format date function in yet. But what you'll see, as you'll notice, is this is now pulling in the content from our blog folder here. It's pulled in that folder, that hello world there, and this is our first blog post. And I think that's really cool. We can go ahead and save that, and you'll see it will update there. And when we click read more, it will take you to a page that doesn't exist yet. So we need to add that functionality. But first, let's clear up this date here. So I'm going to go back to that page.tsx. Or actually, we'll go down to lib and then utils. And then inside of our utils, we're actually just going to add one in here that we can use. We're going to add an export function format date. And this is just going to take an input. And that's going to be a string or a number. We'll allow for both, so we can use this later on as well. And it's going to output a string as a function. What this is doing is saying it's going to return a string from this function. So we'll do const date, and that's going to equal new date brackets input. So we're taking in the date they pass in as a string, and then we're going to try and make a date out of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to return date.toLocale date string. You're going to put en-us here. And then in here, we're going to add some options, and the options are going to be month, and that's going to be long. And then you're going to do day, and that's going to be numeric. And then you're also going to put year, and that's going to be numeric. What this does is it allows us to get the month in sort of a nice format, so it's written out instead of just the number. So now what we can do is we can go and use our format date function. So we go back to our blog page, so page.tsx. What you're going to want to do, or actually go into post item, if we go into post item will be a better place for this. Where we have our date here, what we can do instead is call our format date function from @lib/utils, and then we can wrap that date string around it, like so. We'll save all of that, and you'll see that the date looks a bit nicer here. It now says March 6th, 2024. Another thing that we're going to want to do for when you add a lot of blog posts, at the moment, they're not being sorted by anything. So we're going to go back to our utils.ts here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a function called sort blog posts. So what we're going to do is export function sort posts. And this is just going to sort the posts by their date descending. So if we do posts, and this is actually going to be an array of the posts type. Now Velite actually exports the types for us, which is really nice. So if you see, we'll do post there, but we do want it to change the import for that. So it's going to be import post. And that's going to be from, and then again, our hashtag site/content. So this is now the post TypeScript type. So we say sort post, we're expecting that post object. And what we're going to return is the posts, but we're going to add the sort function onto it. And then we'll add a sort function to sort by date. So that's going to be A, B equals, and then if brackets A.date is greater than B.date, we're going to return what -1. Then we're going to say if A.date is less than B.date, then we can return 1. And then finally, we'll just say return 0. So if they're matching dates, it will just return 0 and they'll just be sorted in line. So now we've got that sort post. Let's go ahead and use that. We go back to our page.tsx. So if you're back in your page.tsx, we'll scroll to the top, and where we had that display posts earlier, what we'll do first is we're actually going to create a const sorted posts, and this is just going to equal to sort posts, because another cool thing that we can do here is instead of just passing through posts, we're going to do filter, and then we'll filter the post by whether the post is published. So if you remember, we had that published tag on our post. This bit's going to cut out all of the posts from sorted. So it's going to sort the posts that are published, and that way we can get rid of it. As I said, if you had hello world here and we had false up here, we save that and I go back to my blog page quickly, and then I changed display posts to equal sorted posts. Again, we'll be adding some stuff to this later, which is why I've got 2 variables here. You'll see there's nothing to see here yet, and that's because we haven't published this blog post technically. So it's in our code base, but if we change that to true, now it's technically counted as published there. So you can add that if you want. So if I went to create a new blog post, we could actually come down here and go hello world. If I just clone that one real quick, you'll see that we'll get that second blog post showing up. Obviously, all of the content's the same, but you'll see this is now a list of the blogs that we have in this MDX folder here. I'm going to delete that one as we'll come back and add some more blog posts later. Let's go ahead and save all of this as stage 7 there, or stage 6, set up blog page, so you can follow along with the Git commits. Next bit, what we need to do is set up what happens when we click read more. So at the moment, it's a bit underwhelming. We go to a 404 page, and the 404 page obviously is trying to look for a page at blog/hello world. So we need to set up the logic for that. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to come into our app folder up here, and then in our blog folder, we're going to create another folder, and this folder is going to be square brackets, 3 dots, slug, so ... slug. Essentially what this is doing is creating a catch-all route. So anything after blog we can now read, and the value of that will be called slug. So at the moment, hello world is what the slug is being detected as, and I'll show you how we actually detect that in the page.tsx. But the reason you use the 3 dots there is to catch all, so it will catch any nested slashes as well. But for now, let's go ahead and create our page.tsx. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a couple of things. Now, it's moaning because we don't have a React component set up yet. But first, we're going to set up the interface. So this is going to be interface post page props. And then what you're going to want to do is add an object called params. And this is going to have a slug on it, which is going to be of type string array. Now, because we're using a catch-all route, it's a string array. If you weren't using these 3 dots, it would just be a string. But essentially, this is saying all of the values, all of the slashes after /blog. So this is going to be an array that just contains the string hello world for us in this case. Next with that, what we're going to have to do is we're going to do export default async function and then post page. And then in this post page, we're going to have the props of params. And again, that's going to come from our post page props that we just set up. Like so. Within here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a return, and we'll just have an article. And then on here, I'm going to add a class name of container. And then I'll add a padding Y of 6. Prose, a dark, shift prose, and now we're going to add this in a minute. It's going to be prose invert, but essentially what this prose and the dark prose invert bit, it uses Tailwind typography so we can get some really good default styles, but I'll show you setting that up in a minute. But for now, we'll just leave that on there. We'll do max width 3XL, and then we'll do MX auto as well, like so. And then in here, we're just going to add a heading 1. We'll do class name, and then we'll do MB2. Like so. So this heading here is going to be for our post title. So how do we go ahead and actually get the post titles out from our sort of slug? So obviously we have the slug of what the title is called, but now we actually need to get the data for the post. To do this, we're going to come up here and we're going to add in a new function. This function is going to be async. It's going to be function, and it's going to be get post from params. And what it's going to do is it's going to take in the params. So it's going to take in post page props, but then what we're going to do is params, like so. And then what we'll do is const slug. So what this has done is given params the type of slug, and then string array is what we're accepting there. So if I do slug here, and then I do params, that's going to equal to the params.slug. We'll add a question mark here just to make sure it doesn't error out if it can't find that. And then we'll do the same here, and then we'll do .join. So this is if there is nested slashes there, it's going to join everything back up into a single string with that join slash there. We'll then do const post. And what we'll do with post is we're going to need that post object from Velite. Again, I'm not going to use that import there, as I'm going to use our aliased one. So I'm going to do import posts from, and then hashtag site/content. And then on post, what we're going to do is we use the find function. And what we're going to want to be finding is the post where the post.slug as params is equal to the slug. So what this is doing is essentially slug is coming out as the value hello world. And then with the value hello world, it's going and finding the post with that slug as params computed field we made earlier. And that's why we made it, is to cut off that blog bit, because we just need to match hello world with hello world here. So now that it's found that post, what we can actually do is return it. And we'll return the post there. The next thing we're going to do quickly is we're actually going to do export async function. And then this is going to be generate static params. Now this is a special NextJS function, and what it's going to return is a promise, and this promise is going to have post page props, and then it's going to be params like so in our square brackets, and then it's going to be another square bracket set there. Now with this, what we're going to do is it's going to be a function like so, so you're going to make it a function there, and then we're going to simply return in here posts.map, and then each post. And then from there, we'll do return, and we're going to return an object. So you're going to have to do brackets and then curly brackets. And we're going to return slug, and then post.slug as params.split, and we'll split that again on the slash. Now, what this generate static params bit is doing is essentially telling Next.js we know what our posts are going to be at build time. Because this is a static blog, obviously we have our content in here. We're not adding anything dynamically from anywhere. So we know it at build time, so you don't need to keep working it out every time the server makes a request. It knows it's a static param, so it creates all of these pages for us at build time. So it's a really helpful tool there, just to stop a load of sort of server requests and having to run this function constantly for that. So there we go. Now that we've got that set up, we can go ahead and go down and start calling our post. So down here, above this return, what we're going to do is const post. We're going to await the function we had earlier, which is get post from params, and we're going to pass it that params prop that we have. Now what we can do is we can do if there is no post, or if the post isn't published. So this was that check earlier that I mentioned. Obviously we have that publish tag. So if it's not published, we're going to call the function not found. And this is from next/navigation. What this does is simply returns a 404 page for you. So if you do not found, it's import not found from next/navigation. There we go. Now we can actually use our post data, as we actually have our post here. So let's give this post.title and go ahead and save that. And there you go. We see we've got that hello world title coming in from our post. Next thing we can do is add in our post description. So if I come down here and I do a post.description, obviously, as this was an optional field, we're going to want to check that it does exist. So for that, we're going to do an and. So if post.description does exist, what you can actually do is use a ternary, and we're going to use that here instead for a safer method. And if it does exist, what we're going to do is we're going to return a paragraph tag with the class name. That's going to be text, extra large, mt-0, and text-muted foreground, like so. And then in here, we'll do post.description in curly brackets there to pull it through from the post. And then under here, after this, what we're going to do is we're just going to render null if it doesn't exist. Now, if you're wondering why I switched out for a ternary instead of an and there, it's good practice, because if post.description was technically equal to the number 0, it would end up rendering that. And there's just some weird conditions that you have to be careful of when you use the and logic. This makes it much clearer what it's doing, and it will only ever render this if there is a description. Next thing we can do is I'm going to add a HR under here, but as you see, we've got our text up here and then our blog post description here. I'm going to add some class name to our post title here probably. Or actually, no, we'll go down here and we'll add the HR. The reason this looks a bit weird in styling at the moment is we haven't got that prose and Tailwind typography installed. I'm going to do class name my-4. Like so. And again, that's going to add that divider so we can see a clear difference between our blog post and then the actual content of our blog post. Now we need to pull through the MDX content. Now this is where it gets a little bit difficult. What we're going to first do is we're going to go to components. We're going to do new file, and we're going to do mdx-components.tsx. Inside of mdx-components.tsx, what we're going to do at the top is you're going to do import star as runtime or asterisk from, and then we're going to import this from react/jsx-runtime, not dev runtime, runtime, like so. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do const use MDX component, and this is going to equal to code, which is a string, and then we'll inline function that like so, and we'll do const function equals new function brackets code. Now this is going to look a little bit weird, but you don't really need to concern yourself with what this function here is doing. We'll do ... runtime like so, and then after this do .default. Now we've got that set up, what we can do is do const components like so, and that's going to equal. And the first component we're going to put in here is image from next/image. What this components object is essentially going to do is how in MDX we can utilize some JSX components. So now we've put image in there. What we could actually technically do in our MDX is use the NextJS image component like this. So I'll show you that a bit later, but that's what this component here is doing for now. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to do interface MDX props and code string like so. And the last thing we're going to do in this is export function MDX content. And then in here, we're going to take in code. And again, that's going to be MDX props. And this is simply going to return const component. And that's going to equal use MDX component brackets code. And then return. And then we're going to use that component that we just set up there. Components. And then we're going to pass it a prop of components. And that's going to equal the components object that we made earlier, like so. So that's what your MDX components page should look like. Now, if we go back to our page.tsx that we had our blog contents underneath this slug, what we can do underneath the my here is call that function or that component, which was MDX content from @components/MDX-components. And then we'll give it code. And that's going to equal post.body. And we'll make that self-closing. Like so. And there you go. You see it pulls through the content from our blog post there. Now, what you may notice, obviously, is that the content isn't styled in any way. As I said, what we can actually do is add in some custom styling. And I'll show you adding in custom components in a bit, but it's worth noting. If you want to completely custom style everything, what you would technically do here is add a H1 and add a component later. What we're going to do is we're going to utilize Tailwind typography. Now, Tailwind typography is some really nice defaults that it will essentially look over your HTML and apply some defaults back to everything. So Tailwind by default gets rid of the styling on H1, paragraph, and everything for you. This adds it back in a really nice way using that pros class name that I mentioned earlier. So to get started with Tailwind typography, we're going to have to go ahead and install it. So we're going to use this command or pm install. So let's bring up our terminal. Let's do pm install. And it's going to install as a dev dependency. And now that we've got that, what we can do is go to our tailwind config.ts. We're going to scroll down to where it has plugins. And what we'll do in here is we'll do require, and then brackets, and then tailwind, or @tailwind css/typography. We'll go ahead and save that. And if we go back to our application now, you'll see that it has been styled better with that hello world tag and that welcome to my blog. Now, Tailwind Pros, it provides some really nice defaults for the styling. So if we go into the blog, you'll see if I start adding a header 3, for example, it will add some really nice styling for that and it will all look really clean. And it just adds some really nice inline styling for things like code as well. And it's some really good defaults to use. So I highly recommend using that. The other thing that we're going to have to do to our Tailwind blog here, or to our blog post here, is add in some custom components. First, I'm going to save this all as stage 7, which is going to be set up the blog page, or set up post page, so you can follow along. So let's commit all of that. Next, what we're going to look at is adding in your custom components. So at the moment, we can only use Markdown and Tailwind stuff, but what if we wanted to add, let's say, like a callout component? That essentially it makes it, you can draw attention to it and you can add your custom styling to the component. So I'm going to show you how we can do that now. What we're first going to do is we're going to go into components and make the component. So I'm going to give this callout.tsx, and this is quite a common one you see. Make sure that's all lowercase for our consistency there. So if I do callout.tsx here, we're just going to make this a simple component. What we'll do is we'll do interface callout props, and that's going to be it's going to have children first, or optional, which is React Node. And then we'll add a type equals default. Oh, sorry, a type. And this will have type of default, or warning, or danger. So we've got 3 states that we can have for this callout. So essentially can draw attention to it on your blog post. And then what we'll do is export function callout, like so. And then in here as well, we'll do children, and then we'll do type. And we'll also make the type equal default so that we have a default type for it. And we'll make sure this function knows that it's callout props. Then inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to return. And this is where we're going to create our callout. So if we do div here, we're going to do class name. What I'm going to do in that class name is call our cn function from libutils. I'm first going to give it a margin y of 6, items-start, rounded-md, border-l-4, a p-4, w-full, and then if it's dark, what I'm going to do is do max-width-none. Now what we can do in that, since we're inside the cn function, we can add an object in here. And what we're going to say is we're going to say on this first object, the key is going to be border red 900, background -red -50. And then if it's dark mode, what we're going to do is we're going to do pros. And what we can do on this key is we can give it a value to say the type equals danger. So this is going to only style it if the type is equal to danger. It's only going to apply that border red and that background red if the type is danger. Now what we can do is also add one for warning. So that's going to be border -yellow -900. And then we can add background -yellow -50. We can do dark, and that's going to be pros as well there. And then we'll say on this type equals, and then warning. Like so. There we go. We've got that sorted on there. And now what we need to do is obviously close off our div. So we've got that div here. What we're firstly going to do as well is pass through the props to here. So we'll do ... props so it passes everything else through. But then also inside of this, we're going to add another div in here, which is going to be a div that just has the children on it. Like so. Now we actually haven't got ... props here, as I need to go and add it up here. Like so. And there we go. We've got our callout component. Now what we need to do is add it to our MDX components list. So we come in here and we simply just do callout like this, and we import it from our callout component we just created. And there we go. Our components object now has the callout. Now what all of this means is we get to use the callout within our blog post. So if I go to my Hello World blog post that you see here, I'm going to add this component to the top. Now since we're using MDX, I can simply do callout, and then I'll do /callout as well. And then I can add in stuff here like, hello, I am a callout. And you'll see what I mean by where we have a callout here. So there you go. You see we have a callout here when it's got a default color. And then we can add in type. We can put danger. And there you go. It's got that danger type on it. And then we could also put something like warning as well. Like so. And there you go. You see it's changing. And again, it's going to have that support for dark mode and light mode. So as I said, it's a really nice way to add some custom components and some nice styling to your blog post besides what we traditionally get. The other thing I want to mention quickly is what if you want to use complete custom stylings for your headings here. So if we go to MDX components, or firstly, let's go to our blog page. So underneath ... slug. If I got rid of this pros and that dark pros invert, what you'll see is obviously the styling will go away as we're not using that Tailwind typography anymore. But what you could do to style this instead is you go to your MDX components.tsx. Now in our MDX components, what we could actually do is you can add a component for each of sort of the header tags. So if you have the header tags, paragraphs, everything, so you'd have to style it yourself in here. Now there are some really good defaults that Taxonomy provides. So if you've seen this before, it's shadcn's blog template that comes with a lot of software as a service stuff as well. But he has some components here. So if we were to copy this H1 component, and then paste that in here, and then also import our cn function. This is just a quick demo of how you would custom style it. You'll see that this Hello World now has the styling that he's applied onto it instead of Tailwind Pros. This is outside of the scope of this blog, but as I said, I'll leave a link to that taxonomy bit if you want to style it yourself. Let's go ahead and add in our pros and everything back so that it's just styled for us by Tailwind typography. And let's go ahead and commit all of this as stage 8 custom components in MDX, as we've added this nice callout component like that. There we go. Now that we've done that, the next thing we're going to move on to is how we can add some nice styled code blocks. To get started with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my own blog post that I've got from earlier. So I'm going to add this into blog here, and this is just code blocks. Essentially what this contains is just a load of examples, so we don't have to type them out here. So I recommend you downloading that as well if you want to go along and test while we're going. So if I go back to blog now, you'll see, let's see what we can do with rehype pretty code. So we click in this, you'll see at the moment we've got our code blocks, but they're not syntactically highlighted. They don't look nice. It's supposed to look something like this. So we can get an outcome where it's highlighted, so things look a bit clearer for the person who's reading it, and also you get highlighting for ANSI, and also you can highlight specific words. So to get started doing that, we need to install a couple of rehype and remark plugins. What we're going to do is we're going to go to our terminal, and then from our terminal, we're going to install the first one, and the first one is going to be rehype pretty code. So that's going to be pmpm or npm. So it's going to be pmpmi, and then rehype dash pretty dash code. And then we're going to make that -d as well to install that as a dev dependency. Next one we're going to install is going to be pmpmi and rehype dash auto link dash headings, like so, and the same thing with the dev dependency. And then we're also going to install one called rehype dash slug. So it's going to be rehype dash slug, like so. And then we'll make sure that's a dev dependency as well. So it's pmpmi rehype dash slug and then -d. With them installed, we're going to configure our Velite to actually use these. So we're going to go down to the Velite config here. We'll go down to where we had that rehype plugins array earlier. And what we're going to do in this array is first we're just going to add rehype slug. So you're going to do rehype slug. And we'll go to the top and import rehype slug. Come up here, underneath this, what we're going to do is first import rehype slug. And that's going to be from rehype slug. Next, what we'll do is we'll import rehype pretty code. Again, from rehype pretty code. And then we'll also import rehype auto link headings. And that's going to be from auto link headings. So from rehype auto link headings, like so. Now we can go down here and start using them. So rehype slug, you're literally just going to put into the array as is. For rehype pretty code, however, what we're going to do is do rehype pretty code, but we're going to put all of this in an array. So it's going to be an array and an array. So you're going to do rehype pretty code round square brackets. And then next to this, we have a couple of options. Now the options I'm going to use, it's going to be theme, and we're going to set the theme to GitHub Dark. So you have a couple of theme options, but as you see with GitHub Dark, if we go down to our code now, it is nicely syntactically highlighted for us. Now, if you want to see these cheeky themes, it's actually the VS Code built-in themes. You can go to this page and it has some examples of their pre-packaged themes up here. So one of the examples there is OneDark Pro as well. So if I set this to OneDark Pro, and then if we went back to our Create Next app, you'll see that the theme has changed ever so slightly from GitHub Dark. I'm going to go back to GitHub Dark here, and you'll see again there, it changes the theme nicely. Next, what we're going to do is set up the rehype auto link headings. To do that, what we're going to do outside of this rehype pretty code array is start another array, use our rehype auto link headings that we imported earlier, and then again, we're going to set up a couple of options here. The first one is going to be behavior, and we're going to set this to wrap. The next one is going to be properties, and we're going to set this to an object. And then in this object, we're going to have class name, and the class name is just going to be an array with subheading -anchor, like so. And then the next one is going to be aria aria label, like so. And then this is just going to say link to section. So that's just to add some nice accessibility support. Now what this has done, and you'll see it change there, is all of our headings have actually become links now. This is so the user can copy a link straight to that specific heading, and they can click on it. Now, what you may notice is when we're doing this is when we click on a heading, it actually gets hidden by the sticky navbar there, which is a bit of a pain for the user experience. As obviously, if you're sending a link to something, you want that heading to show up. What we're going to have to do is change the layout so that it adds and adjusts for scroll when we're behind the navbar. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our layout.tsx, and then up here in the HTML tag, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new property of class name, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a scroll dash pt dash, and then we'll set this to 3.5 rem, like so. So this adds a bit of a scroll padding to the HTML, and it fixes it for us. Now that's got rid of light mode, but if we refresh, that should fix everything. Now if we click on a heading, what you'll see is it nicely displays below that bar there because it's 3.5 rem, which is 56 pixels. So now when we click a heading, as I said, the headings are auto-linked. Now you can actually change the styling of this with that subheading anchor. We'll do this a bit later, as what we now need to look at is if we go down to word highlighting, you'll see it has a default style of highlighting things in yellow like this. Same with the line highlighting, we're actually not getting line numbers and line highlighting working yet. To do this, we need to create our own CSS file. We'll create a new folder and we'll call it styles, again outside of everything, so it's a root level folder. We'll create a new file in there called mdx.css. And for this MDX, I'm actually just going to paste in a load of CSS styles, and I recommend you go and get these from the GitHub theme as well. Essentially what this is a load of pre-styled stuff, so that we're using this for rehype pretty code. And again, this was taken from taxonomy, as it's some really nice defaults, and I don't really want to go through setting this up. As I said, go ahead and copy it from this mdx.css page that will be in the GitHub repo. Next thing what we're going to do is I'm going to change the subheading anchor styling. So we do subheading anchor here, like so. I can then do @apply, and we're going to have no underline. So I don't want to underline the headings by default. But what I'm going to do is hover and then underline. So if they hover under the underline, it's going to show the underline, or if they hover over the title, it will show the underline. If not, it will just show the heading as normal. Now we actually need to use this CSS. So to do that, considering this CSS is only applicable on our blog page, we're going to go to page.tsx underneath that slug there, go to the very top of it, and we'll do import, and then we're just going to import straight from @styles/mdx.css. So that's going to import that CSS for us. And what you'll see with that is the line numbers are going to come in, the headings are going to disappear with the underline, but when we hover over it, the underline's going to show. And that highlighting and the line numbers have come back, and everything just looks a bit nicer in style. And as you'll see, we've got that kitchen sink here, so you'll get the title of the page here and everything else. So if I go into this, I can show you how this is all working. If you want to get your line numbers to show, as you see up here, we have show line numbers after your triple sort of code blocks here, so after your triple comma. What you get is you put your code block in there, you put the language it is, so this can be JSX, JS, this is all MDX logic, but this is just a brief overview. And then you put the curly brackets 4, which says highlight line 4. Or you can do things like /floating styles, which will highlight the word floating styles. And then there's other things as well that you can do, like you can add a title to it. So if you want to say, obviously, what sort of page you're in, you do title is even. Again, I'll have a link to this codeblocks.mdx, which will be in the GitHub repo, and you can see sort of everything that it has to offer. So it has that title up there and that caption. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit all of this stage 9, which is set up the code block styles. Like this. Or MDX plugins as well. So you can follow along. Now what we need to do is we're pretty much most of the way there. We need to just add in sort of the base pages for our blog here. As if we go home, it still says hello world. And we also need to add some pagination to the blog post. What I'm going to do first is we're going to add some pagination to the blog post. So let's go ahead and add that logic. Now, to get started with pagination, what I'm going to do is add some example blog posts again, which you can probably find in the GitHub repo. Reason I'm doing this is just so we can see a longer list here that we need to paginate. As you see here, I've got a load of demo blogs, which to be honest, ChatGPT wrote. And then we'll go ahead and we'll add pagination to this. The first thing we need to do is install the pagination component. To do that, we're going to go to shadcn and find the pagination component. Here we are on that. So we've gone to docs, pagination. And then we're on npx shadcn UI. Obviously, you can copy that command. I'm going to copy the pm one. And we'll copy and paste that in. Now, before we build out that component, what we're going to do is add the pagination logic to the blog page for now. So as I said, on this page, we're going to have some pagination. To do that, we're going to go to this page.tsx, so not the one in the slug folder, but just your default one where it has that my ramblings on all things web dev. First thing we're going to do in here is do const posts underscore per page, and we're going to make that equal to 5. Now, sometimes it's common practice to make these things capitalized when that's sort of a fixed value. So we're going to leave that up here as const post per page. And essentially you could change this to whatever value you want for how many posts you want to show per page. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to add search params, and that's how we're going to be doing paging. So to do that, what we're going to do is an interface. So interface, and we'll call this blog page props. So blog page props. And then we'll do search params. And then on this search params, what we're going to do is page, but we're going to make it optional, and that's going to be a string. With this, we can now pass it through to the blog page props. So we can do search params here, and then we can do blog page props. So essentially what we're doing in NextJS with the page.tsx is you can get the search params of the current route by just looking at the search params prop. And this is just defining what we're going to expect for it to tell TypeScript that we know there's going to be a string there, or as it's optional, there may not be. Next bit we're going to do is we're going to handle that. So we're going to do const current page, and that's going to equal to number, and that's going to be search params, and then question mark dot page. So that's optional, so it may not be there if there aren't any search params provided. And then we're going to do or 1. So if this number comes out as null, otherwise it will be 1, and that means it will default to page 1. Obviously, when they just visit the /blog page, we don't want that page search param there yet. The next thing we need to do is change our logic for the display posts. To do that, we're going to come down here and do display posts. And then we're going to do sorted posts dot slice. And then in this slice, we're going to do posts per page. And then we're going to do the asterisk to times. And then we're going to times this by the current page minus 1. So this is obviously going to start, if you're on page 1, this is essentially going to be 0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do posts per comma, and then posts per page, and then asterisk current page. So what this is doing is it's adding in the logic to strip down the display posts here for how many posts we should show per page based on what page we're on. So obviously, as we're on page 1 here, this bit here is going to be 0, and this value here is going to be 5. So we're getting the first 5 items in our sorted posts array to display to the user. So you'll see here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items here. And if you're on page 2, the calculation would change so that this becomes 5 and this becomes 10. So we get the next 5 items in our pages. Next, we need to work out how many pages we want. So it's going to be total pages. And then in here, we're going to do a math.sil. And then from this, we're going to do our sorted posts.length. And we'll divide this by posts per page. So what this is doing is getting how many pages we need, because obviously math.ceiling, if you have one post left on the page and a bit left over, it's just going to get the highest value for that. So we're getting the amount of pages that we need to display. With that logic done, we can actually start to get our pagination working. To do this, I'm going to go into components. I'm going to start a new file, and I'm going to do query-pagination.tsx. And then inside of the query pagination folder, we're going to do interface or file. We're going to do interface, and then we'll do query pagination props. And then on this, we'll do total pages, which we expect to be a number. And then I'm also going to add class name here so we can pass that through as well. And we'll make that optional as a string. At the top of this as well, since this is going to be using client functionality, we'll use our useClient directive, like so. And now we can go ahead and create our component, and we'll do export function query pagination prop, or query pagination, sorry. And then on this, we're going to have total pages and that class name. And then this again is going to be of type query pagination props. Inside of here, we're going to need a couple of things. The first one is going to be const path name, and that's going to be using that use path name hook from next/navigation, like so. And the next thing we're going to need is the search params, which when we're using the client-side stuff like this, we can use the use search params hook from next navigation as well. Let's work out what that current page is again as well from the search param. To do that, we're going to do const current page equals number, and then we'll do search params. And then with this, what you do is you do .get, and we're going to get the search param we're defining, which is page. So essentially our pagination is going to work like this. So if you're on page 3, for example, it will look like this. So we're going to get that value. However, we're also going to do that or 1 again here. So if that value doesn't exist, it defaults to page 1. Let's do some simple math here. Just for our sake, we'll do const previous page equals current page, and then obviously -1. And then we'll do const previous next page equals current page add one, like so. The next thing we need to do is create the page URL. So when they click on a button, what URL does it go to? Because obviously we want to append this question mark and then page equals 3 to it. To do that, we're going to do const create page URL, like so. And that's going to equal to, we're going to make a function here. So we're going to take in a page number, which is going to be a number, or it can be a string. And then in this function, what we're going to do is const params, and this is going to equal new URL search params, and then we'll create the new URL search params from the existing one. So what this is doing is we can't actually modify this search params, it's read only. So we're going to create a new set of them. What this essentially makes sure is that we don't overwrite any search params, we only overwrite the page param. So if you had searching with your search params as well, where it was like search, it's not going to get rid of that one, it's just going to change the page value. We're then going to do params.set, and we need to set our page search param here. We're going to set that to the page number we've passed into the function, and we'll make it toString in case you've passed in a number as well. And lastly, we need to return the page URL. To do this, we're going to use the template literal. We'll do $pathname, like so. And then you need a question mark here, and then you do $, and then you do params, like so, .toString. What this is doing, as I said, is it's taking our existing path name here, and then appending on these search params that we've just created. Now we can go ahead and actually start building out our function. So if we do return, and then we're going to add the pagination, which is going to be what we just installed from shadcn, so from .ui/pagination. If I scroll up here as well, and we actually just add in the imports we're going to need, we're going to add pagination content, we're going to add pagination item, pagination link, pagination previous, and then pagination next as well. So there we go, we've got all of that imported, so we can come down here and start using it. Now on this pagination down here, what I'm going to do is give it a class name, and we're going to give that class name the class name prop that we have earlier. This allows us to pass through a class name to this so we can style it how we want. Now inside of pagination, we're going to do pagination content. And then inside of pagination content, what we're going to add is our previous page button. But what we need to do is we'll say if previous page, and then we'll do is greater than or equal to 1. Essentially what this is making sure is they're not actually on page 1, because if you're on page 1, you don't want to render this button as there is no previous page. And then what we'll do with that is we'll render a pagination item, but first let's put null at the end of our ternary here, so it's going to render null otherwise. And then within here, what we can do is we can say pagination item, and then within pagination item, we can say pagination previous, like so. And we give this a href, and the href we use here is going to be create page URL, so the function we made earlier, and then we'll pass in the previous page that we've also calculated from earlier, like so. And there we go, we're going to have our previous button there. What we're going to do is do the same thing for the next page, so I'm going to copy and paste this here from this previous page logic. We'll copy and paste that here and just put a space here. So what you need to do is change this previous page bit here to next page. We're going to change this logic here to is greater than or equal to total pages, so it should look like this. And then again, we'll change this to this is going to be next page. And then we'll change pagination previous to pagination next, like so. There we go. So this is the previous and next button. So if that's all you want to display, that's what you can have, and you can actually finish at this setup for pagination. But next we're going to add in when they have page buttons. But first, let me show you how this is rendering in. So if we go back to our page, I scroll down to the bottom. Outside of here, I'm now going to add in our query pagination, and we need to pass it our total pages, which comes from that value we added earlier. And if I save this, we can scroll down and you see that I have a next button here. So we go back to our query pagination. Now I'm going to add the page buttons for sort of the page count. To do this, we're going to do our curly brackets. We'll do array, total pages. So we're creating an empty array with the amount of total pages. What we're going to do is fill with empty, and that's for performance reasons. And then we'll do map. Inside of the map, we're going to do brackets, underscore, index. Now this is common practice with the underscore, as we're never going to read this value. So it's just a way to indicate we don't care about that, because that value is always just going to be an empty string. We're caring about the index here. And then inside of this, what we're going to return is simply a pagination item, like so. And then on this pagination item, we're going to have a pagination link. And that pagination link, firstly, we're going to add an isActive prop. And what this is doing is just checking if they're currently on that page. So you're going to do current page is equal to index plus 1. And then we're also going to add a href here. And the href is going to use that create page URL we used earlier. And then inside that bracket, you're going to do index plus 1 again. Now that we've got that pagination link, what we can do is obviously inside of it, we want the value of it to be index plus 1. So what it displays. We can then go back to pagination item. We're going to add a class name. Class name is going to be hidden and then small inline block. This just hides it if they're on mobile, which you might have too many pages. So you'll see it will now disappear on the right there. And now what we can also do is add in a key. So the key here, I'm going to make the key equal to, then I'll put a template literal. I'll do page, button, and then dash, and then $, and then index, like so. So that's what the key is going to equal there. And there we go. That is pagination actually set up for us. So if we scroll down and we click next, what you'll see is it will change this search param up here to 2, and all of those blog posts change there. And now there's not another page set to go to. We can press previous. Now if I make this a bigger screen, you see those page numbers come back. So we have 1 and 2 there. So we can switch between page 1 and 2, and it's really nice and works like that. Now what we need to do is just quickly make it so that that is a bit better in its sort of alignment. So let's go back to our page.tsx, which is again underneath that slug bit, and we're going to add in a couple of class names here. So we're going to do class name, we'll do justify-end and margin top -4. And what you'll see is that will put it over here and add a bit of spacing to it. And there we go, that is our blog page pagination setup. So if I go ahead and save all of this as stage 10 pagination, and we can move on to the next bits. So we're basically nearly done with our blog. And as you can see, we've sort of got the base of it where we've got the blog posts all working. The final bits that we need to add, we're going to do some search engine optimization. We're going to add the about page, and we're going to edit the home page as well. And I'll show you how we can pull through sort of the latest posts, like I showed at the start, how we had it on our home page. The first bit though that we're going to tackle is the about or the home page here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our page.tsx here, and we're going to start to fill this out with some content. So to get started here, let's go to our section tag here, and I'm going to add some classes into this. We're going to add a space of Y6, PB8, PT6, MD, and then we'll do PB12. Medium, we're going to do MT10, and then large, we'll do PY of 32. So again, just defining our padding based on our screen size there. I'm going to get rid of this hello world here, and then obviously start a new line here. Inside of here, we'll add a div. We'll give this a class name of container, flex, flex-col, gap-4, and text-center, like so. Inside of this div here, we're going to add in our h1 tag. This is going to have a class name of text 3XL. If it's small, we're going to add a text of 5XL. If it's medium, we're going to add a text of 6XL. If it's large, we're going to add a text of 7XL. Again, you can define this based on how much text you actually put in. We're then going to do font black, and then we're going to do text balance. And then inside of this H1, you can put the text you want. So I'm going to put hello, and then I'm James, like so. Now you'll see a linter error here, which is coming from ESLint, which it says that the apostrophe there can be escaped with and apos. It's just good practice to do this in your JSX. So we do and apos, like so. It renders out the same thing. It's just now an escaped character, which is a little bit safer. Now that we've got that, let's add a description about who we are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a p tag here and do class name. We're going to do max width, and I'm going to set this to 42 rem. You might want to set this based on how much text you put up here. Then I'm going to do mx auto, text muted foreground, and then small, we'll make it text XL, and then we'll also add text balance to this as well, like so. Inside of here, let's just put in welcome to my blog template built using Tailwind, shadcn, Velite, and NextJS 14, like so. And go ahead and save that, and you'll see we've got our description here. Now, I do want to point out that text wrap balance is really cool, and it's a bit of a new feature. You may have previously used a React component for this. It's a new feature of CSS. Essentially, if we don't have that, you'll see that the text gets split between the line, and it looks a bit wrong. If you do text balance, it tries better at sort of balancing the lines and how, like, the width of the actual lines. So it looks a bit nicer there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add in sort of our hero buttons because we have some links to click on. So we're going to do div, class name, flex-col, gap-4, justify center, small. We're going to do flex-row, and there we go. And then inside of here, what I'm going to do is add a link. I'm going to have a href. That's going to equal /blog. Let me make sure I'm importing link from next/link. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add a class name, and we're going to change this out for the cn function, again importing that from where we have before with libutils. We're then going to use button variants here, and then inside of button variants, we're going to add our object. We're actually going to do size, and we're going to set that to LG or large. And then outside of all of this, we're going to do width full, unless it's SM, which will do width fit, like so. And then if we go ahead and save all of that and actually make sure we're closing this properly, with this link here, I'm going to put the text view my blog and save it. And there you go, we have a big button for view my blog. Let's go ahead and add the next one. What I'm going to do is just do a link to my GitHub. So I'm going to do link href equals site config dot links.github. Then again, I'm going to do that target _ blank to make sure that it opens in a new page. I'll do that referrer or that relationship thing that I did before. So rel, and then that's no referrer, like so. And then we're going to add a class name. And this one again is going to be cn. And then we'll do button variants. And then inside of the button variants, what I'm actually going to do here is use a new variant. So this variant is going to be the outline button from shadcn. We'll add back that size of large. Then outside the button variants, we're going to add that width full and that small fit again, width -fit, like so. Then we're going to go ahead and close that, and I'm just going to call that GitHub. So if I do GitHub, like so, and save that, you'll see we've got two buttons here. Now these buttons will, if we're on large mode, they will go out like this. And then when we're back on that mobile screen, they will go back to being stacked on top of each other for better mobile support. The next bit we need to do is add that latest post section down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close all of this, and then we're going to put a section outside of this section, and it will moan at us that it needs to be wrapped in a JSX tag here. So what you can do is you can do quick fix wrap in JSX fragment, but essentially what that does is just adds this JSX fragment here. And now we have our next section we can work on, which is going to be our latest post section. With this, what I'll do is we'll give this a couple of class names quickly. So class name, that's going to equal container, max width 4XL. We're going to do padding Y of 6. We're going to do large. It's going to be padding Y of 10. Flex-col, and then space -Y-6. Then we'll also do a margin top of 60 and save that. Now inside of this section tag, what we're going to do is we're going to add h2, and we're going to give that a class name of text-3XL. Then we'll do small, text-5XL. We'll do medium, text-6XL. We'll do large, text-7XL, so pretty similar to the one we had up top. We'll do font -black, sorry. And then we'll also do text-center, like so. And then inside here, I'm going to call this latest posts. Spell that correctly, like so. And there you go. You'll see underneath this section here, we have our latest post header. So what we need to do is obviously fill this out with some of our posts. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an unordered list. I'm going to give that a class name of flex, and then flex-col, like so. Inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to get the latest post. Now to do this, if we go up to the top, where it says home here, if we do const latest posts, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do sort. That's going to equal to sort posts, So the util we created earlier from lib/utils. And we're also going to want to import posts from Velite as well. So we're going to do posts, and then we're going to do from, and that's going to be that hashtag site/content. Now back down here with our sort post, we're going to do posts, and then we're going to just slice based on how many of the latest posts you want to show. So I'm going to show the 5 latest posts by doing 0,5. Back down here, we're going to do latest posts, .map. And then inside of this .map, we are going to add in our post item. And that's why we made it a reusable function earlier. So this is going to be post, like so. Get rid of that because we're just going to straight up return a list item like this. And then on each of these list items, if I just expand this out so it looks a bit better, each of these list items are going to need a key. That is going to be the post slug, like so. And then we're also going to give it a class name, and the class name is going to be first, and that's going to be border-t. And then it's going to be first border-border. Inside of here, we now need to use our post item, which we made earlier from @components/post item. We're going to give it a slug, which is equal to the post.slug. A title, which you'll see again equal to post.title. Description, equal to post.description. And a date, which is equal to post.date. And then we can go ahead and self-close this post item like that. Now that we've got that, we obviously need to make sure we're closing our map function correctly here. So if I come outside of this list item, let's do that. And go ahead and save that. And you'll see that we've got our latest post showing. So it's the top 5. As I said, you can change this to whatever value you want. If you just wanted to show the top 2, you'd have it like that. And there we go. That is how we add our homepage. And I'm going to commit all of that as homepage changes. So that's going to be stage 11, homepage changes. Next, what we're going to work on is the about page. After the about page, we've got dynamic graph left, SEO, and the footer. So let's get started creating the about page. To do that, we're going to go back to our folder app here. We're going to create a new folder called about. And then in here, we're going to add a new file, page.tsx. In here, we're going to do the same thing with that export, default, async, function, about page, like so. And then from here, we're just going to return a simple div. And again, I'll put hello inside of here, and we'll just check that we can actually go to that page now. So there we go, we're on our about page. Now for the about page, I'm actually using shadcn UI's avatar component to display the picture of us. So if we go to here and we go for his avatar component, we're going to install that. Now what this has support for is it's really good because it has support for showing something if it can't load the image. So you can just show initials, for example. We're going to go ahead and use that as well. So let's bring up our terminal. And then in here, post in that command for pnpm. So that's going to install the avatar component for us, and I can get rid of this. And then we can go ahead and start styling out the about page here. So if I go back to the page, first thing we'll do is obviously our class names on our divs here. So we'll do container, we'll do max width 6XL, we'll do py-6, we'll do large, and then we'll do py-10. Like so. Now inside of this div, I'm going to add another div. This div is going to have class name, and that's going to be flex-col, items-start, gap-4. Medium is going to be flex-row. Then medium is also going to be justify between. And then medium gap-8, like so. And then inside of this div, guess what? We're going to have another div. This div here is going to have the styling of class name. It's going to be flex-1 and space-x-4. Now inside of here, we'll have our heading 1 tag that's just going to say the about me bit. So we'll do class name. This is going to be inline-block, font-black, text-4XL, and then large text-5XL, like so. And then in here, what I'm going to do is say about me, like this. And there we go, we've got that about me text rendering. And now similar to the blog page one that we had before, what I'm going to do down here is do HR class name equals my-8. And that's just going to add in a nice divider for us so that I can have my about me section here. Make that self-closing, like so. There we go, we've got our nice divider there. Underneath this, what we can do is add a div. We're going to add a class name onto this of flex-col. MD is going to be flex-row. Then we're going to do gap-8, items-center. But then if it's MD again, or medium, we're going to do items-start, like so. Inside of this div, what we can do is use another div. We'll do class name. This is going to be min width -48, max width -48 as well. And then we'll do flex-col, gap-2. Inside of this, we're now going to use that avatar component that we imported from shadcn UI. So it's going to be avatar. And then with this avatar component, we're going to do a class name. And this class name is going to have a height of 48, so h-48, and a width of 48, like so. And inside here, what we need to do is use avatar image, again importing from that shadcn component. The source of this is going to equal /avatar.png. And then what we're going to do on this is also add an alt. And the alt for this I'm going to use is going to be a template string, and it's going to be, well, actually we won't use a template string here. We can do siteconfig.author. So it's just going to, the alt for the image of us is just going to be the image, the author's name. There we go, we can go ahead and save that. And now the next thing we need to do as well is add an avatar fallback. And then in this avatar fallback, you're simply just going to put your initials. So I'm going to put JC for Jolly Coding. Now you'll see there, we've got our avatar rendering, but it's falling back to the avatar fallback. Reason for that being is that we don't have our avatar.png in our public folder yet. So if you're referencing a static image, you can literally just reference it by the path name, because anything you put in public is just going to be at the root level of your application. So I'm going to put an avatar.png, which is just going to be my avatar, into this public folder. And there we go, we've got my avatar here. If I go ahead and close this and save the page again, we should see that it loads in the actual avatar there. So we've refreshed the page there, and we've got my avatar showing. The next bit we're going to do is underneath the avatar, I'm going to add a heading 2. And underneath this, I'm going to add a class name. And this class name is going to have text-2xl, and then font-bold, and then text-center, and then break-words, like this. And then in here, what I'm going to do is siteconfig.author again. So there we go, we've got my name underneath my avatar there. Underneath this, we can add sort of something like a job description. So we can do class name. If I do text-muted-foreground, like so. And then we can also do text-center and break-words again, like that. And then inside of this, what I'm just going to do is software developer. And you'll see it looks nice. It sort of gives you your header there, and then it gives you what you would have for your sort of your job description or something. Now outside of this div here, we're going to add a paragraph tag. Then we can do class name, text-muted-foreground, like so. Text-large, and then padding Y of 4, like this. And then in here is where you can put a description of yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste in a load of text like this, which is lorem ipsum, but you'll see that's a description of yourself there. And now we've built the about page, and you'll notice when you expand this that it goes out and actually renders based on the device you're on. Because we're using medium here, if I go into these controls and then make it large, you'll see that it will go side by side if they're on a larger device, but if they're on a smaller device, it will do that stacking like that. So it's nice and responsive as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save all of that again with our stage number. So this is now stage 12, and that's going to be the about page, and commit that. Next, what we're going to look at is open graph images. So this is part of SEO. So what happens when you share your website on WhatsApp or Twitter or something, you usually see when they paste in a link, you'll see an image below. Now, what we're first going to do is we're going to use a static image. So if they're just on any page like this, we'll just show a default image. And to do that, all you need to do is literally make an open graph-image.png, and then you just put that into your app folder here, and NextJS works out the rest for you. So you'll see I've made this picture earlier, which says Jolly Blog. And now what happens when I've got this, if I inspect element, what you'll see is with our meta tag here, if you can see on this bit here, we go into our head for SEO, when we scroll down, you'll see it now has an OG image and it's using that one we just pasted in. Now, the problem with this is you might want it to look different for when you paste in a blog post, for example. Because blog posts are essentially dynamic content, you have different blogs. What you can do is you can make an open graph image per blog post, but obviously we don't want to do that manually. So what we can do is we can get the code to do it for us. So whenever someone shares our blog on Twitter or something, it will look like this and we'll have a nice dynamic open graph image for it. To get started with that, what we're going to want to do is go up to our app and we're going to create a new folder here called API. Now in this API folder, what we're going to do is create another new folder called OG. And then in OG here, we'll create another new file. And what we're going to do with this is call it root.tsx. Now, inside of that root.tsx, what we're going to do is we're going to do export const runtime equals edge. Now, this is for hosting on Vercel. This is essentially what tells NextJS and Vercel that it's going to be running an edge function, which is what you want for this. The next thing we're going to want is a font for our open graph images. Now, you can't use the one we've set up in the Tailwind config. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to have to get the font we want and the specific size we want. For this, what I'm going to use is Interbold. Again, this will all be on the GitHub. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. If I just collapse everything. If I create a new folder again outside of everything, call it assets. And then inside of assets, create a folder called fonts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in an Interbold font. Like so. So there we go, I have interbold.ttf. Now if I go back to my API and root.tsx, what we're going to do in here is we're first going to create the root. So it's essentially a GET request that's going to return an image. So to do that, we do export async function and then get in capital letters. And the request here we're going to have equal to a next request. And that's going to come from next/server. Like so. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a try tag up here, like this. And then outside of the try tag, what we'll do is we'll do catch, brackets error. So basically, if there's an error, we're going to return a new response. And we'll set that response to failed to generate image. And then we'll put comma, and then we'll put curly brackets status, and we'll make it a 500 server error. Now up here, we're going to import our font because this is how you use this in requests like this. What we'll do is const interbold. And essentially what we're doing is a fetch request to get our font from the server. So what we're going to do here is fetch. Then you're going to do new URL and then brackets. And then from here, we need to find our assets/fonts file. So we have to do the // notation here to do // and it's going to be assets/fonts/inter-bold.ttf for the font that I used. And then you're going to want to do comma as well, import.meta.url. This essentially goes and gets the asset from your site for you. At the end of all of this, we then want to do a .then. And then with the then, you're going to want to do brackets res. And then in this res, do res.arrayBuffer. Like so. And then make that a function call. Like this. I don't know why that did that. That was supposed to be a .then. And we want to add a bracket here to make sure that that's running properly. So there you go. Your interbold should look like this. So essentially it's doing a call to fetch. And then we're building the URL. And then we're getting an array buffer back for our font. What we'll do here is we'll do const font bold, and this is where we're then going to await that request that we had earlier. So now we've got our font loaded in. Next thing we're going to do is, because we're building our OG image dynamically, we're actually going to build our OG image from our search params. So to do that, what we can do is do const and then search params like this, and then we'll do request.next URL. So we're using the shorthand there to get search params. Next, we're going to do const title, and that's going to equal search params.get, and then title. What we can then say is, if there is no title, what we're going to do is return another new response to say there's been an error, as there should always be a title here, and there is always going to be a title here if we're using it in our blog posts. So then I'll do no title provided, And again, I'll do status 500, like so. Now, outside of all of this, what we're going to do is const heading. And this heading is going to equal title.length, like this. And if the length is greater than 140, we're going to use a ternary here. And what we're actually doing here is just trimming the title so it fits on the image. Now, you can play around with what you want this value to be based on what your image will be, and we'll generate this in a bit. I'll show you how we can test this, but we'll do 0.140, and then we'll also just add an ellipsis outside of this so that you can see that there is other stuff. If it's not, we'll just return the title. So your heading should look like that. Now is where we need to build our image. And funnily enough, we're actually going to be building our image from JSX components and Tailwind. To do that, we need to do return new image response. And image response, you want to import not from next/server. We're going to import this from next/og. So do import, and then it's going to be your curly brackets, image response, and that's going to be from, and that's going to be next/og, like that. Then with our image response brackets here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to, again, wrap in another set of brackets, put in a div here, like this. At the bottom of this, we'll do this now. Outside of this bracket here, we're going to do a comma, and then we're going to do an object. We're going to say width, and we're going to say 1200. We're going to do height, and we'll do 630. This is pretty much the standard sort of width and height you want for this. And then we're going to do fonts as well. And fonts is going to be an array, and then we're going to put an object inside of this array. The name is going to be inter for that font we just set up earlier. The data for that font is going to be that font bold that we just requested earlier. The style we're going to put for it is going to be normal, as it's not an italic font. And then we're going to put the weight of the font, which was 700, as it's the bold font. We'll go ahead and save that. And now this would technically work, and our image would just be empty. But we can go ahead and make this. So essentially what we're doing is if we go to, let's say, /API now, /OG, you'll see firstly, no title provided. Then we add in our search params. Again, we would do this all on code from our blog page, but this is essentially how we can test it. If I put test here, you'll see we're actually, this is an image we're getting back here, and it's a complete white canvas at the moment because we haven't got anything. What I'm going to show you is I'm just going to paste in some code, but I'm going to show you how you can build it out yourself. If you go to Vercel OG Playground, you can see some various ways that you can build out your OG image. I don't want to spend too much time, obviously, doing a tutorial on dynamic graph images, as I actually have a separate video on this. But essentially what I'm going to do is paste in some code, and I've built mine using JSX and Tailwind. If you are going to do the same thing using Tailwind, essentially what you want to make note of is that you don't do the class name bit, you do TW equals instead, and not all of the Tailwind classes are going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And if I go back to my image here and refresh the page, you'll see that we now have a nice OG image that I'm going to use for when we share a blog post, and that's just going to be the blog post title. As I said, you're going to read that from this heading that we defined earlier. And then I've also added some other stuff from our site config here. So I've got the URL, I've got the GitHub link, and then I've just sort of made out the jolly blog bit. And there we go. That's all coming from here. So you'll do like blog post here, and you'll see that the image will change to respond to that. Now that we've got that, we actually need to go ahead and use that in our blog post. As I said, this open graph image here, NextJS is taking care of that for us, but on the blog pages, it will not be. It will just show that image for now. We need to go and tell it to use something different. To do that, we're actually going to tackle that in the SEO step, which is next. So I'm going to go ahead and commit all of this as stage 13 and dynamic graph image. And commit all of that. So let's get on to how we handle the SEO, and we will start from this blog post page. So if we go back to our website here as well, I'm just going to get rid of that, and we're going to go to a blog. So if I go into blog, and then let's go into Hello World. Now, the way Next.js handles SEO is you use metadata. Now, the metadata for something dynamic, we actually need to use a generate function. So we're going to come underneath our generate post from params here. And what we're going to do is we're going to do another async function. We're going to export this one, however. It's going to be export async function, and it's going to be generate metadata. Now, this is a Next.js sort of special function, so it needs to be called exactly this. And then we'll take in params, and again, we'll have that params be post page props. Now, on this function, it's going to return a promise of metadata. So let's just set that up as well. It's going to be a promise of metadata, and metadata is going to be imported from Next. So you'll see here, we've imported metadata from Next. Now that we've got that, what we need to do is set up a couple of things. Firstly, in our generate metadata function, we actually need to get the post, and we'll do that using the same way we did it in our function down below. We'll do get post page from params, and then we can just pass through params here. What we're going to do is we're going to say if brackets no post. So if we couldn't find a post for it, we're just going to return an empty object here, as we are not going to have the correct data to fill out the metadata for the SEO. Next, what we're going to do is const og search params, and that's just as I showed you with the dynamic image. We need to get what the search params are going to be to provide that URL. So we do URL search params here. Then we'll do og search params dot set, and that's going to be title, and we're going to set that to the post dot title. So this is essentially, as I showed you with the image, what's going to tell it the title that we need. Lastly, we need to return the metadata for our post. Now I'm going to show you some sensible defaults of the metadata. That's going to be your title. You're going to want to do post.title. Then we're going to have a description, and again, that's going to be your post.description. We're going to have the authors. So you use authors like this, and then for author, it's just going to be a body, and I'm just going to do a name, and then I'm going to do siteconfig.author, like so. Then what we can do is this open graph key. With open graph, that's going to be an object. Then we define our title again here. That's just for the title of the open graph section. Then we define our description again here, so post.description. Then what we're going to do is put a type, and our type here, we're going to use article. We're going to do URL, and that's just going to be post.slug. And then we're going to have images. This images is actually going to be an array because you have an open graph image, and then there's also a Twitter image, which for us, we're going to use the exact same one that we're using for open graph image. What we're going to do here is we're going to do URL, and URL is going to equal a template string, and that's going to be /API/OG, and then a question mark, $, and then we're going to do OG search params.toString, like this. Underneath this, we're going to give it the width, so we're telling the SEO what the width is. Then we're going to give it a height, and that's going to be 630. And then we're also going to give it an alt tag. And for our alt tag, we're going to do post.title. There we go. The next bit that we're going to need is after our open graph, we're going to need Twitter. So after the open graph object, we'll do Twitter. And then with Twitter, it's going to be the same thing, except here we'll do card. And then card, you're going to use summary large image. And then under that, we're going to do title. And that's going to be post.title. Then under that, it's going to be description. And this is going to be post.description. And then under this, we're going to do images. And that's going to be an array, except this is just an array of the URL. So for the URL, again, it's API/OG, question mark, the $, and then we'll do OG search params.toString. And there we go. Now if we inspect here and go to our meta tags in our head up here, we should see that it's pulled it in from localhost 3000 API image title. So this is what would show if we shared it on Twitter. If I go ahead and paste that here, you'll see I've got that blog post, hello world, and our image has been generated dynamically for us so that anything that picks up an OG image will pick that up for us. Now with SEO, we do need to tackle it in a couple of other areas. Next, we're going to tackle it in the About page. So we're going to go to the About page here. At the top of our page, because this is a static page, aka there's nothing dynamic about it, what we do here instead is we just export const metadata, and then we'll import that metadata type from Next again, just to make sure we're using the right stuff. This is going to equal, and we're just going to set this title to About Me. So again, this is the stuff for SEO that Google will look at and other things like that. And also it's going to be the title of the page. So I'm going to call this information about me. Obviously you can write a better description than that. But now if we go to the About page, what you would see as well is this title up here will change from Create Next App to About Me. So there we go. Once we save that, it's changed the title to About Me. So that's how you can change that tag as well. We're also going to want to change that in the blog page, not the one we just did, but this static blog page we have. So we go into there and we scroll to the top. We can add in that metadata again. So again, same thing, exports const meta data, and that's of type metadata from NextJS or from Next. And this is going to equal, again, we'll just give this a title, my blog. And then we'll give it a description as well. And we'll just say, for this, I'm just going to say this is a description. Like that. Now, the last place that we need to tackle SEO is for the general overview of our site. And we actually do that in the layout.tsx. So this is the default SEO for various things. So we're going to come in here and you'll see that they've already put in the metadata for us, but we're going to come in here and change some of this out. For title, we're going to do siteconfig.name. For description, we're going to do siteconfig.description, as we made that earlier. Like so. And then we also need to add a metadata base to this. Now this tells Next.js what URL to look at. For this, what we're going to do is a new URL of process.env.next_public_app_URL. But then at the end of this as well, what I'm going to do instead is we'll use !siteconfig.url. Essentially what this is saying is if we don't have this environment variable, which we're about to set up, then fall back to the siteconfig URL. The reason you might want to use this environment variable is it allows us to switch between when we're fully deployed or when we're localhost, so we can do testing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, and what you do instead is you add a .env.local like this, and then we add next_public_app_URL, and we set that equal to, in my case, it's going to be HTTPS or HTTP shift.//localhost 3000. So because this is a local one, we're going to set it to localhost. Again, you don't want to commit your .env.local, and when you're actually deploying this, you'll see later, we'll set the next public app URL to the actual URL you want to get the OG images from. So now that you've got that, everything should be up and working on that. So if we go back to our layout.tsx, that is pretty much all we need for the metadata. The next thing we're going to add is the viewport, which while it's not SEO focused, it's similar to this metadata here. What we're going to do for this is export const viewport, and then we'll import the viewport type from Next again. Now again, this is another special Next thing, so you need it to say viewport, and we need to export it as Next.js picks that up. Then what we're going to do is add theme color. Now, the reason we add theme color here is you can actually change the underlying theme of the viewport. Again, where this is relevant, I'll put up a couple of screenshots, is, for example, if we're on iOS, you'll see that the top bar above everything where sort of my battery status is, by default, is just a color white. And if we add a theme color here, we can actually match it up with our color scheme. So if I do a object here, and then we do media, what we can do in this media is add in a media query. So what we'll do is prefers-color-scheme and then light. So if they prefer the color scheme light, what we'll do is we'll set the background to white, like so. And then we'll also add another one, which just says media. And then we'll do brackets prefers-color-scheme, and then one for dark. So we'll do dark here, like so. And then we'll do comma, color, and then we'll set this to black. So that's just going to set what, as I said, that sort of header bit and that underlying viewport to whichever one they prefer, so with their own light mode or dark mode. The next bit I'm going to handle as part of sort of this SEO bit is changing our favicon here. So this is what shows up here. So this would show the Vercel icon, and it's just this little image here. So to change that, all you have to do is pretty much just replace that favicon in that app.ico bit or in that app. So we put in a new one, so that's my site logo. Once that's in, Next.js should take care of it. You can also do the same thing with an Apple Touch icon. And then also you might get your icon in a PNG format. What you want to do is with Next.js file-based routing, it has to be called apple-icon.png. And then also if you have a small icon, you can call it icon1. And then you can put in another icon and you can call that. So these icons here are different sizes. You have to call your first one icon, your second one icon1. Next.js goes in under the hood and it can detect what the icon size is, and then it will add that to the meta. And you'll see that we've got our icon changed up here as Chrome has decided to use one of these. You can actually get these favicons from various sites. There's favicon icon generators, and essentially it will spit you out an Apple Touch icon, and you have to rename that to apple-icon.png. And then it might also give you your icon in a size such as this is 16 by 16, and this one here is 32 by 32. And again, you have to do icon and then icon 1, and they have to be in numbered order. And you can put your various icon sizes in there, and Next.js takes care of it under the hood. If we actually inspect the element here and open up head, what you'll see is with this meta property, we should have our icons somewhere down here. So we've got that theme color that we just set with the viewport. We've got that about me title, and then you'll see we've got our Apple Touch icon. We've got our 32 by 32 icon, 16 by 16 icon, and our fav icon there. So that's how you add your fav icons. It's really easy with Next.js. It's really cool that it does that. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and commit all of this as stage 14, and we'll just call this stage SEO and Favicon. There we go. Make sure I commit everything, stage everything. There we go. Commit that. And now what we're going to move on to is the last bit, which is the site footer. So we need a site footer at the bottom, and to do that, we're going to go into our layout.tsx. But obviously, we need a new component for that first. Let me just collapse everything, go into components, new file, then I'm going to do site footer.tsx. So in our site footer, we're just going to have our name and then various links. So what I'll do is export function site footer, like so. And then we'll return, and then we're going to return the footer semantic tag here. And then we're going to add a div inside of here. On this div, we're going to add a class name. The class name is going to be mb-6, mt-14, flex-col, and then items-center, like this. Go ahead and save that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to the layout again so we can see it as we go. So if I go into layout.tsx, scroll down, we've got our site header, our main content, and then here we can put our site footer, like so. Go ahead and save all of that. Now we should be seeing something down here. Obviously, there's no content in there yet, so we'll get to that. Inside of this div, we're going to add one more div. That's going to be class name mb-3. It's going to have flex and space-x-4, like so. Inside of here, we're just going to add some anchor tags because this is going to be to some external sites here. So we're going to do target, and that's going to be equal to _blank. And then what we'll do is we will add relationship no referrer again. And then the href to this. This is actually going to be my mail link. Now, an interesting thing you can do with mail links is you essentially do mail to, and then you put in your email. So I can do sort of, let's say, hello@example.com. And what that will do is when they click on it, it will actually open up that email browser if they want it to. So if you're on a Safari or something, for example, on iOS, it will open up that default email app and then sort of pretty much just start the email for you. With that, what we're going to do is I'm going to put a span in here. Again, this is going to be for the screen reader, and this is going to say mail because we're going to have a icon in this. I'm going to be using the Lucid React mail icon here. I'm going to do mail, and then it's going to be class name, and I'm going to give that a height of 6 and a width of 6, like so. There we go. Make sure I import the mail component from Lucid React, like that. And there we go. We should see at the bottom there, we have our mail icon. I'm going to add a couple more of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste this bit here. So the anchor tag we had. I'm going to copy that down here, but what I'm going to switch out is this mail to. So the first one I'm going to do is, again, a link to my Twitter. So site config.links.twitter. And then again, change the screen reader bit to say Twitter. And what we'll do is we'll replace this with icons that we made earlier, and then Twitter. There you go. You see my Twitter link appears down there. Final time, we're going to do this for GitHub. And there we go. If we do site.links.github, change this bit here to GitHub, and then change our icon here to GitHub, like so. Go ahead and save that, and we've got our 3 icons down there. Now, outside of this div here, what I'm going to do is add another one. So this is going to be a little second part to our footer. I'm going to add a class name. I'm going to give this mb-2 flex space-x-2 text-small, and text-muted foreground, like this. Now that I've done that, what I'm actually going to do in here is give it an anchor tag, href, and then what I'm going to do is our site config.links.personal site. So this is maybe where I link to my personal site. Again, I'll put a target on it of _ blank. And then what I'm going to do is put site config.author, like this. And there we go. You see on my footer sort of displays my name there, and you can click on it to go to my personal site, and that is our site footer. And that should be on every single page we have. So if we go on About Me, there we go. It is on every page there. Now, a little thing we're noticing here, another error, is this avatar is appearing above the sticky header here. So let's go ahead and fix that. Before we do that, let me just commit everything here as stage 15, and then call that site footer. And then we'll just go ahead and fix this little issue. What I'm imagining is it's a Z-index issue. So if we go into our components here, we're going to want to find our site header component. And where it has sticky top 0, we're going to come to the front here, and we're just going to add a Z-index of 10. And there we go. We have that nice glass effect, and the avatar actually falls behind it now. That's a good way to fix that. And let me just commit that as a really quick stage 16 fix Z-index header. The last bit we're going to look at with our finished site here is how you can deploy it to Vercel. So my instructions are going to be focused on deploying to Vercel. What I'm going to do is come in here and close down the server here, and I'm going to do pm run build. And this is just a nice quick step to check that it will build first before we start to push it. So you might see some warnings, but you can go ahead and ignore them. So Velite is going to do its thing, and then NextJS is going to do its thing. And once this is built, the pages, there we go. We can see that we've built our pages. And what you can actually do is pm run start, and that runs essentially the built version of your application. So here we go. We've got our finalized application. Hello, I'm James. View my blog, and then some of the latest posts. We've got our light mode picker here, or system picker. We can go in and we can go about. We've got our GitHub and Twitter links, and then inside of our blogs, we've got some really cool code components. We have GitHub flavored Markdown built in. If you don't know what GitHub flavored Markdown is, it just adds a few extra features to Markdown. We've got that built in because Velite comes with that. And you can see we've got some images in here. It's really cool. And we've just got our site footer down there as well. And everything is utilizing the latest technologies with the React server components and shadcn UI. So now, how do we get to actually publishing this on Vercel? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to publish all of this to a GitHub repository. I'm going to publish this to a private repository called My First Blog. And then what we'll do is we'll go to vercel.com, log into your website. You might not have any projects here, but I have a project that I've used before. What you do is you click add here, you click add project. And then if you link it to your GitHub, you can actually just import from your blog page. So it's My First Blog. So if I go ahead and import My First Blog, what I can then do is say the framework preset, so it's detected it's Next.js. We can add a couple of environment variables here. Now we're not ready to do that yet, so your build may fail at some point because it can't read an environment variable, but we're going to go ahead and hit deploy. Let me enlarge this. Now what this is going to do is it's going to build, and once that's done building, we can get to the next step. There we go. Once it's done building, you'll see this congratulations, and it will even include a screenshot of your blog post. So we can click this, and you'll see we've got a URL provided by Vercel. What we're going to do is we're going to copy this URL, and we're actually going to change some environment variables as our dynamic OG image may not be working yet. If I go into our blog post here and click inspect, for example, that's a very small screen. But if we go into our head, you'll see that the OG images down here, that's still loading in from example.com. That's because that's what we had in our site config. So what we can do is we go back to our new project. If I continue to the dashboard, we go over to settings, we go environment variables, and this is where we want to add that next public app URL again. So it's going to be next_public_app_URL. And that's where you're going to want to put your correct value for your blog. So it's going to be something like that. I don't believe you need the trailing slash. We're going to go ahead and save that. And then we can cause a redeploy. If we go back to deployments, if we click on this current deployment, or go back to the project, we'll click on this current deployment, which was this build. It's deployments, and then click on this. And then we can click redeploy in these settings here. So we'll hit redeploy like that. And then you're also going to want to go back to your code. And when you're back in your code, what you're going to want to do is change it in that site config we had earlier to the correct value. So you can now change this URL to the one that we had earlier, which is myfirstblog-dusky.vercel.app, like so, and get rid of that trailing slash. Now we go back to Vercel, this is going to build, and again, hopefully once this is built, we should see our OG images will be working. There we go, now that it's built, if we go back to our Vercel application, we go into blog, and then we go on to our Hello World blog here. If I then do inspect, let's see what our header tags now say. If we scroll down to where it says meta with the OG image, you'll see that it's actually pulling through from the correct link here. So if I copy this and paste this, this will be the OG image when we go to share it somewhere like Twitter or WhatsApp. And there we go. That is our static blog built. So you can now write your blog posts using Markdown, and we've utilized shadcn UI in here, Tailwind, some of the NextJS 14 features such as that SEO metadata stuff, and the generating dynamic metadata. And we've also added this latest post bit, and we can use Markdown to write our posts with some custom components in here, like the callout component, with Tailwind pros styling everything nicely for us. So we get some really nice looking blog posts like this, where you can add in your comments and your code, and it's all syntactically highlighted for you. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know how I can improve these tutorials. This has actually been my first long form content one. If you got this far, please subscribe. And also, if you got this far, please link your blog. If you have a blog and you've set a blog up using this template, please let me know. I'd love to see it. Thank you very much for watching.